Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Samwell Tarly. The chubby boy spoke without being able to meet Jon's eyes. Tarly, one of the great houses of this realm, known for producing great generals in the history of Westeros. Jon commented calmly. He had seen 1 or 2 Tarlys in green visions, organizing their strategies on the battlefield along with their armies, drawing great lessons from them. Thank you for the compliment, but I don't consider myself a great Tarly. The chubby boy commented with slumped shoulders. Are you the youngest son? Jon asked. He didn't know all the details of every house, only the main ones for what he studied before coming here. But he knew that Lord Randall Tarly had 2 sons, and his first thought, seeing the behavior of this boy his age, was that Samwell wasn't his heir. No, the boy seemed to have a defeated tone with that, while Jon raised an eyebrow at him. No, I understand. Jon noticed something very wrong there, but decided not to get involved in the internal affairs of these families, and looked at the sky. When I arrived, I saw you alone looking at the stars. Do you like it? Jon didn't know why, but he ended up making conversation with that boy. I like to look at them. I read a book by an Maester from 100 years ago who studied astrology. The boy seemed to open up with that. Jon looked at him with more favorable eyes. So you read a lot? He asked. Yes, Your Grace. He said a bit more timidly, expecting Jon to judge him for it. After all, he had the name Tarly behind his first name. I'm not Your Grace. I belong to another realm. Call me King of Artica, Jon said while the man nodded. Jon then continued speaking. The constellation of Sagittarius is beautiful, isn't it? He continued the conversation while Samwell looked at him confused. Your Grace, I mean, King of Artica, you said the constellation of Sagittarius? You know the stars. He stammered, and Jon smiled at him. Yes, we study astrology in Artica. And relax, young Tarly. I don't know why you're so nervous. I'm just a visitor taking a bit of air on the balcony. He said, with all due respect, King Jon, but you are one of the most enigmatic men Westeros has ever seen. Everyone only talks about you, the boy of 8 and 9 named days who became a hero of the North, who went beyond the wall and created a kingdom and is as rich as any great house, has shown to be as intelligent as a maester, and isn't even afraid of King Robert Baratheon, where many years ago the news that you told him to shove a royal decree up his ass reached all the great houses in Westeros. He exploded as if imitating someone who talked about Jon. Samwell had finished and looked at Jon, staring at him with piercing eyes. I'm sorry, Your Grace, it slipped out, he said hastily after realizing his outburst and Jon's expression. Ha ha ha. Jon couldn't hold it and started laughing at that more than he normally would at something. That was hilarious, Lord Samwell. I think I needed that. Jon spoke with a humorous tone, while the young chubby boy didn't know what to say. I don't know what to say. King Jon, he said, and Jon sighed before smiling at him. This boy could be a source of information too. So, young Tarly, you spoke about me, but can you tell what they say about my sister? Jon wanted to know, since he noticed his sister standing out a lot, wanting to anticipate the thoughts of the nobles of this realm. Lady Arya Stark? Well, they're saying your sister is the most beautiful lady of her generation. Many nobles are discussing sending letters to Winterfell, besides being the daughter of a great noble. She also has kinship with you, someone extremely wealthy and militarily powerful. Most nobles want a friendship to become their ally. He said, Friendship? I thought people here mostly didn't like me because of my bastardy. Jon questioned. Yes, at first everyone treated you with disdain in their circles, but your skill in the training field, the favor the Tyrell family places in you, as well as Prince Renly Baratheon's great interest in you. He spoke to Jon, who was thoughtful about this. He didn't have time to watch all the nobles all the time, so he didn't care much about them. It seems my father will receive messages from all over the realm if things continue like this. I wonder what will happen when they see my sister in the archery tournament the day after tomorrow. Jon couldn't help but laugh. Archery tournament. King Jon, Samwell asked, surprised. Yes, she will participate. Imagine the faces of all the competitors when they start losing to an 11-year-old girl. Jon said. Samwell didn't know how to respond. Anyway, thank you for your honesty, Lord Samwell, Jon said, seeming to have taken a liking to the boy, better than the faces of the people he had met in this realm so far. It was nothing, King Jon. He spoke with respect. About what you said about the constellation of Sagittarius. Can you tell me more about it? I don't remember reading anything like it, he said, and Jon nodded. Of course, as a reward, I'll share a bit of my knowledge. Jon began, pointing his finger at the stars in the sky. The sky was extremely bright due to the lack of light in this era, although it would be much better seen in forests and deserts. Jon then started explaining, taking out a piece of paper he always kept with him and a quill, drawing all the stars and their positions in the sky. If you connect all the stars in a drawing, they form the image of a Sagittarius, a mythical beast with the lower body of a horse and the upper body of a man. It is said to be a beast that represents freedom. Jon drew and showed it to the young man. Does that thing exist? Samwell was impressed with the drawing, immediately asking if that thing existed since Jon had giants, dwarves, and all kinds of fantasy with him. No, Jon smiled. That's why I said it's mythical. Eastern culture can explain it better. They say people born under this constellation tend to be more free-spirited and love their freedom, though I don't believe a person is defined by the stars above them at their birth. Jon clarified in the end. Yes. Samwell, despite being surprised, spoke. Anyway, I'm going to the hall. Do you want to come back? Jon asked, and he shrank back. No, it's not a place for someone like me, he said, shoulders slumped again. Jon didn't respond, seeming to understand that this young man was heavily judged, and there were many people at the entrance of the balcony looking at them, with some jokes directed at the boy. All right, I'm going. I hope to see you again, Lord Samwell Tarly, Jon said, and began to return to the hall. At the main table, Olenna spoke all she could about Lyanna Stark to Arya, while she seemed quite excited. In the end, the prince stole her away. Everyone knew something was wrong as soon as he handed her the flowers, but no one imagined what would happen next. Olenna said, The Mad King burned my grandfather and my uncle Brandon alive too. Arya spoke. Yes, it's true, but your uncle went to Red Keep demanding your sister after she was kidnapped, despite having threatened the prince and being imprisoned for it, she said. Arya fell silent after that. You know, you remind me a lot of her, Olenna admitted. Everyone says that. Arya commented. Yes, but you possess not only the beauty. Your claws are equally sharp. Since you will participate in the archery tournament, I hope you don't disappoint, she said, leaving Arya shocked, not knowing this information yet. What do you mean I'm going to participate in the archery tournament? She had no idea about such a thing. Your brother hasn't told you yet. He made an agreement with Prince Renly to be at this banquet, but it's better if you talk to him, she said. All right. Although Arya wanted answers, looking towards the track while Jon left with Renly, she would have to wait until he returned. It is a great pleasure to speak with you, young one. But may I exchange a few words with my granddaughter? Olenna asked as she saw Serena and Marjorie approaching the table as well. All right, Arya nodded, leaving Olenna's side, as she wanted to talk with Serena a bit too. How was dancing with the prince? Olenna asked Marjorie. It was an honor, grandmother. The prince is very charming. Marjorie spoke after sitting beside her grandmother. But I saw your glances going elsewhere, she commented while watching her granddaughter dance. Marjorie felt embarrassed. I can understand you, my granddaughter. He is a man who manages to be more handsome than Renly and his brother, who already make all the maidens fall madly in love. A bonus is that Jon of Artica seems to like women a lot, unlike the last two. Olenna laughed at that, while Marjorie felt embarrassed, thinking that her brother and the prince were lovers and must be meeting somewhere at this party alone. After all, Jon of Artica was coming back from the castle balcony alone. Do you want to dance with him? Olenna asked suddenly. I couldn't, Marjorie commented, looking at Serena talking to Arya a few chairs away from them. Don't be silly, just one dance. It won't hurt anyone, Olenna said, and Marjorie seemed a bit hesitant. Willis, Olenna called from her table. Willis, who was talking to some nobles near the table, looked at his grandmother. "Take your sister to see our guests," she requested, and Marjorie, with no way out, got up from the table and went to her brother before whispering her reason in his ear. He nodded and started walking with Marjorie towards Jon, who was talking to some nobles who approached him to discuss some business matters and seek friendship with the Arctic King. "I sense that Lady Marjorie wants something with Jon," Arya said next to Serena as they talked about her possible participation in the archery tournament. "I know. She couldn't stop looking at him during the dance," Serena commented. "Isn't that bad?" Arya looked at Serena, expecting some jealousy. "Jon will always be looked at. I can't do anything about that, and Jon doesn't seem interested in this woman." Serena spoke calmly. It wasn't like Jon was looking at Marjorie the way he looked at Nyra and Dorne. King of Artica. Jon was talking to some nobles who were even sycophants while he heard Willis approaching, using the cane to walk with one hand and his sister on his arm with the other as they approached. "Lord Willis, Lady Marjorie," Jon said while the other nobles also greeted them. "My lords, how are you?" Willis asked the other nobles while Marjorie looked directly at Jon. "Is the banquet pleasing you, King of Artica?" she asked. Jon looked at her and nodded. "Yes, I like your food. It's fresh, and mixed with our drinks, I can't complain." Jon said, "I hope so. Can our luxuries be compared to your kingdoms?" she asked curiously. "In large part, yes. But if I'm honest, my lady, Artica can surpass you." Jon was sincere, while Marjorie was surprised at Jon's preference despite not really knowing his kingdom. "That is quite surprising. Would you take me to dance?" she asked while only the two of them were talking, as Willis had grabbed the attention of the nobles there. Jon had a choice: to talk with those sycophants who wouldn't let him go to the table, or to have a dance with this woman. He didn't think much and then raised his hand for the lady to give her hand to him. Marjorie gave a sweet smile as she raised her hand, and Jon took her to the dance floor. Serena, Arya seemed shocked by that. "Let them be." Serena shrugged, not caring about it. Jon moved to the dance floor while many watched him at that moment. He prepared in the middle of the floor, placed his hand on the waist of the flower of this realm, and began to dance with her. "I've never danced with a king, so I am honored by this," she said, looking into his eyes with sincere admiration. That dance seemed to surprise everyone around them, as many heirs were hoping to dance with Marjorie after she initially danced with the prince, but she ended up dancing with the Arctic King. Marjorie continued talking during the dance. "I saw you dancing, but now seeing you leading, it is so charming. Did you learn in Artica too?" she asked, letting Jon lead her in the dance. "Yes, Lady Marjorie," Jon said. The woman in front of him was one of the most beautiful he could find in Westeros, but he wasn't surprised by her beauty. He had his wives whom he considered even more beautiful. "Is there anything you don't know?" she questioned with a smile. Jon gave a small smile. "We are constantly learning, my lady. To say that you know everything, no matter how good you are at something, is foolishness. There's always something we can be learning." He smiled charmingly. "You speak with such wisdom." She couldn't help but murmur as she looked into those eyes that could lead any lady to bed. Marjorie had no experience, but she couldn't deny that if this man wanted to deflower her tonight, she wouldn't resist. They continued dancing for several songs without anyone interfering. They continued like this for 20 minutes until Marjorie felt herself sweating. As much as she enjoyed continuing the dance, she didn't want to ruin her perfect image. "Can you take me to the main table, King of Artica?" she asked in a submissive tone while Jon nodded. As they began to move, one of the red wine twins quickly approached, interrupting their path. It was the twin who hadn't asked to dance with Arya. "Lady Marjorie, may we dance?" he asked. "Sorry, my lord, but I'm tired and need to rest a bit," she said with the charm expected of a woman of her status. The noble only nodded, looking displeased and even giving Jon an angry look for taking so much of Lady Marjorie's time on the dance floor. Jon didn't care about him. "It seems the prince has returned," Marjorie commented as she held Jon's arm, returning to the table. "Lord of Artica, I was waiting for you," Prince Renly greeted as Jon sat between him and his wife. "I am back," Jon said, though he had hoped to return earlier, but was approached so many times that he ended up dancing. Did you have a good dance? Serena looked at him while asking. Well, I can't complain, Jon said, and she nodded without jealousy. Serena wasn't as jealous as Ygritte. Even when Jon slept with Nyra, she didn't mind, even expecting her husband to find more wives in the future, as he had always made clear. So, Lord Jon, Lady Arya is very excited about the tournament, Renly said while Jon looked at Arya beside Serena. Lady Olenna told her. Serena commented, though Jon had already heard it from a small hidden rat. He was also surprised to hear about his aunt in that tournament many years ago, which ignited the flames of war that later brought down House Targaryen. Yes, thank you, Jon, Arya exclaimed excitedly. Jon nodded and turned back to Prince Renly. I'm sure you seem to want to discuss something more with me, Jon said. Yes, King of Artica. I want to make a proposal. He began as Jon raised an eyebrow, though he already knew. What would it be? Jon asked. I am very interested in your sword, Dark Sister. As a descendant of House Targaryen, I believe it to be a perfect sword for me. He began with a friendly smile, while practically demanding the sword. Well, you may have Targaryen blood through your grandmother, and even be the prince of the realm, but that doesn't give you the right to something found in another realm many years ago. Jon spoke calmly as everyone at the table heard this, making the atmosphere quite dangerous. Are you saying the prince has no right to the sword? Loras suddenly spoke while the royal guards behind Jon remained alert to any possible conflict. I am, Jon said calmly. I respect you, King of Artica, but I'm sure the nobles here present would agree with me. Renly continued. You think they have any power over my belongings? I have a fleet at sea at this moment, and I'm not lying when I say I could conquer the entire realm right now. I doubt all these nobles could organize themselves when we launch an attack here. Jon spoke with a dangerous tone, shocking everyone at the table. He was talking about attacking this realm. You are. Renly couldn't believe what he was hearing. He expected anything but a possible war. I am saying, Prince Renly, that I came to this realm to negotiate, but if you want a bloodbath, we can propose that as well from the moment someone tries to steal from me or raises a sword to threaten me. So, I hope you don't doubt I will do something. The same can be said for you, Lady Olenna. Jon spoke with a tone he hadn't used with the old lady yet, implying that he expected her to doubt his words so he could launch an attack with his fleet. He could devastate Highgarden and return without the realm being able to launch a counterattack or Westeros being able to stop them, because at sea they were invincible with Arctic technology. The table was in a very dangerous situation while no one could say a word after Jon's little speech. Loras placed his hand on his sword, while the royal guards did the same. At the boy's first move, he would lose his head. Loras dropped that sword. Olenna finally spoke, more serious than usual. She turned back to Jon, feeling that this might not end well for either side. For her, even if she harmed Jon, it would be a catastrophe to deal with thousands of soldiers landing on her coast and marching here. They didn't have an army ready to face them. Mother, Mace tried to speak. Shut up and let me talk. She growled at him before turning back to Jon. I think our tempers are a bit high, King of Artica. I'm sure Prince Renly didn't mean it that way, did you? She raised an eyebrow at Renly, who was sweating a bit. Yes, Lady Olenna is right. Perhaps my words were a bit heated, he commented, still frowning. After all, he didn't want a fight to happen while trying to intimidate Jon. Let me rephrase my proposal, King Jon. He began, regaining some composure. I want to bet on your sword. I am willing to give a large piece of my lands and Stormlands for you to build a port, as you did with Dorne. He spoke, try not to sound threatening anymore. You want to give me land for my sword in a contest. But what do you want to bet on? Jon asked, but without a threatening tone, seeming almost friendly again. How about you participate in the joust? If you win, I am willing to give you these lands. If my personal knight wins, I get your Valyrian steel sword. He proposed. Jon thought about it in silence. The entire table waited for his response, while other tables in the distance seemed to notice something was quite wrong there. All right, it doesn't seem bad, Jon said. He seemed just surprised, but he had already heard Renly and Loras's conversation before they came to the main table, and he could easily win some lands, so he was willing to accept. That's great. Renly clapped his hands happily, while the rest of the table seemed to sigh in relief. Renly then stood up from the table and clinked his utensils to get the entire hall's attention. The bard stopped playing at that moment with the prince's announcement. "Attention, nobles of the Reach," Renly began. "I, Prince Renly Baratheon, am pleased to make an exciting announcement at this banquet. I am honored to reveal that our illustrious guest, Lady Arya Stark, will participate in the archery tournament. Witness the impressive skill of this young lady from Winterfell, who promises to surprise all the competitors," he said, while everyone looked at Arya in surprise. "A girl participating in archery? What absurdity is this?" Many exclaimed in low voices, but no one dared to disagree with the Prince of Westeros and his decision. Arya felt hundreds of eyes on her, but she didn't care as she smiled, ignoring the disdain. She would prove to be one of the best archers in the tournament. Furthermore, Renly had not finished. "There is a special challenge I want to share. Our valiant foreign king, Jon of Artica, known for his conquests and skills, has decided to participate in the joust at my invitation. However, Jon is not a traditional knight, and, instead, brings an exciting proposal for all of us. He wagers the legendary sword Dark Sister against the lands of Stormlands with me. Jon and I have agreed to participate in this joust as a friendly contest. If Jon wins, he will receive a portion of the Stormlands to build a port, similar to what he did in Dorne. If my personal knight triumphs, the legendary sword Dark Sister will return to the hands of one who has Targaryen blood by descent." Everyone was so surprised by this that they forgot about the child participating in archery, looking at Jon with interest. Despite not being a knight, wagering his Valyrian steel sword was exciting for everyone there. Let this banquet continue to celebrate courage, skill, and friendship between the realms. May the gods bless the competitors, and may the winds of fortune be in your favor. Please continue with the celebration. The archery competition will begin the day after tomorrow, and the joust next week," Renly announced while the entire hall stood up to clap at the proposal, looking at the main table. The tournament had become much more interesting than before for everyone. Jon returned to his camp after the banquet while the party continued a little later with the nobles getting more drunk. The next day, he woke up and had the first meal with his group in the main tent. "Jon," Arya approached him excitedly as she sat next to him. "I'm going to participate in the archery tournament," she exclaimed, finally having the chance to celebrate with him. "What? The little one is going to participate in the tournament?" A dwarf stood up from his bench in the hall, asking loudly, which seemed to have caught everyone's attention. "Yes, Jon got me into the tournament," she complained. "Ha ha ha, that's very good." The dwarf raised his mead mug, something he used to drink all day long. "Arya," a giant sitting nearby, also said in a deep tone, cheering for Arya. People seemed excited in the tent about the chance of Arya participating in this tournament. "They seem excited," Serena said beside Jon. "Yes," Jon grumbled and picked up his cup in front of him, while Arya looked quite happy with the attention she was receiving and raised her cup up. Everyone noticed this and started to calm down as their king asked for their attention. When things finally settled, Jon decided to speak. "Now that you know we have Arya to participate, I can add one more archer from our ticket to the tournament, since if they let us participate freely, we would fill the tournament with Articans and not give the Southerners any chance to win any placement in the tournament," Jon said as a wave of laughter sounded through the area. "So let's be fair too. All those who want to participate in the tournament, let's have a small tournament among our best archers present, and the one who wins will be the archer who will represent Artica," Jon said while everyone nodded. "Can I participate?" One of the giants spoke, and Jon looked at him, understanding why he asked. After all, this giant was a specialist in long-distance combat. It was this giant who shot the incendiary arrow at a group of thousands of whites many years ago while they were returning from Winterfell. "Stone, giants cannot participate, but we will have a much bigger tournament in Artica as soon as we return." Jon spoke calmly while the giant looked a little sad, but nodded as another patted him on the back to support him. Since giants could not participate and dwarves were not particularly fond of archery, despite having their own long-range weapons, only humans would participate while the group nodded to that, with some interested in participating. "What a drag. Archery seems boring," Will they accept an axe thrower? Tormund raised his voice while some laughed at his question. Do you only serve to throw axes, Tormund? Maybe they will accept it if you can throw an axe as far as an arrow, the dwarf exclaimed, laughing loudly. Tormund looked at the dwarf with a mocking smile. Ah, and what do you know about throwing, little man? I bet you can barely throw a stone. A stone? I've thrown a mead jug off a man's head 20 meters away and hit a target smaller than your ego, the dwarf replied, banging his mug on the table while some laughed at that. 20 meters? Huh. I threw an axe from the top of the wall of Artica and hit a running wight. Tormund replied, crossing his arms. Well, that may be true, but I doubt you can hit the target after drinking as much as I do, the dwarf responded, raising his mug in challenge. Let's make a deal, little friend, Tormund said, leaning in. After the archery tournament, we'll have our own tournament. You with your jugs and me with my axes. The loser buys the drinks for the entire night, and it has to be ours. Southerners don't know how to make good alcohol. The dwarf smiled, accepting the challenge with a nod. Done, big guy. I hope you have a lot of gold because you'll need to buy many rounds. Let's settle down, everyone, Jon finally said, interrupting the discussion while everyone paused to listen to him. We will have our small tournament today, since the official tournament will be tomorrow, so be prepared after the midday meal. He spoke while his group nodded. They continued breakfast after that, and Jon went for a walk around the camp with his wife. He did not go to Highgarden because he wanted to stay with his people. Arya continued training, more than ever, trying to prove her skills in the tournament, the first official one she would participate in her life. He ended up spending the rest of the morning with the two wolves while calling his birds to spend some time with them after being so busy for many days. Beautiful as always, Jon said to Phoenix and Blue Fire, landing on his arm without hurting him. Jon did not respond while he petted their heads to avoid stating the obvious. Thinking about bonding your children with our child, Jon said, hoping they would also have their own bonds, expecting them to inherit a large part of their powers, although he believed they couldn't do that with everyone. After all, Jon received direct powers from the gods, but if they had just a little bit of them, they would do very well. Another one? Serena couldn't help but smile at this. You already intend to bond them with a pack of wolves as soon as they are born. What's next, a dragon? She joked. I haven't found any eggs to do that yet, but of course I will bond them with dragons. Aragon can't be lonely forever, can he? Jon said, still looking at his eagles. After that, they returned to the tent for their midday meal, and the camp set up the small tournament with some Articans participating, wanting to represent Artica in the tournament. The competition was quite simple, while a soldier, who was not among the royals, ended up winning the contest. You managed to win, Eldrich, Jon praised him. Eldrich was a man who grew up in the northern forests, the son of a hunter and a healer from his tribe. From a young age, he learned the art of hunting and survival before joining Artica at the age of 21, showing great talent and learning quickly. In a few years, he became an excellent archer. No one was very surprised that he was the champion among the entire camp. Thank you, my king. I will bring victory over the Southerners, he affirmed, raising his bow, and Jon nodded. That's good. It's getting dark. Let's have a feast and prepare for tomorrow, Jon announced as they prepared everything for the party. While the camp held their festivities, drawing attention as the dwarves made noises that even their neighbors could hear, in the castle, Renly was sitting on the balcony, drinking wine. You see, they know how to have fun, an elderly voice said beside him, and Renly looked at Olenna sipping tea in the evening breeze while many banquets were happening in various camps outside the castle walls. They even canceled the castle's banquet to save it for tomorrow after the tournament. Yes, what strange people. My brother would surely love to be there, Renly admitted. Even though that boy offended him years ago with the royal decree story? She asked, raising an eyebrow. My brother doesn't stay angry as Stark for long. You know he is soft with that family, Renly said. I highly doubt he would do that if he really knew. She murmured softly so Renly couldn't hear. She sighed and spoke loudly again. So, you put my grandson in for that sword? Olenna questioned. That sword will be mine. You will see, he said confidently. Have you seen him hold a blade? If he does half of what he's capable of with a sword in a joust, you'll have to give a large amount of land to that boy. Stannis will not be happy with that, she commented with a smile. I still have confidence in your grandson that he can win against Jon Artica. Besides, my brother has nothing to do with the Stormlands. I have the lands by right that my brother, the king, granted me, Renly said. All right, just don't speak so loudly. Haven't you heard the rumors of Jon Artica being able to enter animals and spy on us and control them? She said, waiting to hear what he thought about that. Another nonsense. No one does that, Olenna. He spoke, and she shook her head discreetly, quite disappointed. Do you think he will be an ally? You almost created a war for us. And he is right. If they indicated an attack, we could not gather the men of the realm before he could bring down Highgarden. She admitted, perhaps I was wrong and thought I could play with him, but he proved more dangerous than I thought. Besides, he could be a future ally. After all, a friend with great friends has great power. Even if I lose my lands, I can still gain his friendship more easily, he said and looked at Olenna. Perhaps this will greatly facilitate the chances of your granddaughter becoming queen by my side. She did not respond immediately, sipping her tea calmly until she finished. I hope so, she replied, looking towards the noisier camp with a huge bonfire. The dawn light finally arrived as the camps began to wake up for the great day of the archery tournament. Everyone seemed to start their day like any other, but there was a great concentration of people gathering in the middle of the tents where the small tournament arena was, with Tyrell men organizing the place for the day celebration. Jon spent the morning as he did the day before, eating with his family and people, talking with them, and organizing who would stay as camp guards while part of the group went to the tournament. In the afternoon, people began to head to the location, which filled up every moment for the start, which was to begin shortly. The place was packed with nobles, commoners, and bards seeking inspiration for new songs. Let's go, Jon said as he rode a horse, not wanting to enter the crowd with the wolf, which would not end well. His group soon followed, with 4 giants accompanying them, making people not want to have problems with him. They passed through the tents of other nobles, who stepped back, seeing the giants who had put on their armor again, making the ground shake with their steps. Renly was excited for this event. Although archery is not the most popular event in Westeros, it would still be interesting. Has my guest not arrived yet? He asked the Renly family gathered in the main podium as he looked at the podium reserved for Jon. We have sent some servants to inform them, my prince, Willis replied. Don't worry, he has just arrived. Olenna responded calmly as a huge uproar began at the arena entrance, with people running away, fleeing from someone arriving. Soon all the nobles in the stands looked stunned at the giants arriving, standing out in the Artican group led by Jon, entering the tournament grounds and heading to where the Tyrell servant had indicated before leaving the camp. They know how to draw attention. Garland couldn't help but comment, looking at those giants as he always did, wondering how he could defeat such a thing alone. They continued as Arya returned to Jon. The nobles stay in the stands, the main nobles in exclusive podiums with roofs to protect them from the sun, and the commoners stay in the middle of the field. Arya observed. Yes, that's how southern nobility works. Jon said as she nodded. King Artican, you can enter, but I don't think those giants can join you. A servant organizing the seats returned to Jon. That's fine. They will stay beside the podium, Jon said, as there was a space between the podium and the stands where his group could stay. Good thing we brought drinks, a dwarf exclaimed as the nobles looked strangely at them, carrying drinks, and with the giants, no one would try to approach the group. Jon went to the podium and sat next to the Prince of Westeros. It's good to see you, Prince Renly, Jon said as Renly smiled. Likewise, I hope to see your 2 representatives making history, he said. They will, Jon said confidently as Serena sat next to him, and Arya remained standing, not joining them due to her participation in the tournament. Are you that confident? How about a bet? 1,000 gold coins if your sister and your champion lose, he said, not really believing that Arya could stand out, so he focused on a man Jon had chosen to represent him. 1,000 gold coins caught the attention of many people there, who looked at the conversation with interest, waiting to see Jon Artica's response. 1,000 coins. How about 10,000 coins? Jon raised his bet tenfold, while Renly was a little disconcerted by this. 10,000 coins. People seemed to gasp at this. It was a very large amount. Jon saw that Renly was still a bit stunned and decided to increase his chances even more. How about this, Prince Renly? If my man wins the tournament, you will give me 10,000 coins, and if he loses, I will give you 100,000 gold dragons. How about that? Jon spoke loudly enough for everyone in the nearby podiums to hear, while some people in the stands also seemed stunned by that. The Hightower and Redwine families looked at Jon with wide eyes at such an unfair bet. Ha ha ha! Someone started laughing amidst the brief silence, and Olenna couldn't help but find it amusing. This is really interesting. So you have that much confidence in your man. The Tyrell family will give you 10,000 gold coins if your champion wins the tournament. Olenna spoke while Mace stood there with his mouth open, seeing his mother make such a bet. All right, I am so confident that I will give 100,000 gold coins to each of you two if I lose. Jon responded while Serena didn't seem to care much, but her husband seemed to be enjoying this. Quick, write this down. A bard shouted to another with a paper, as this bet would make a good song to entertain all those nobles who looked at Jon, wondering if he crapped gold or something. Well, this is really unexpected. Olenna, who had her confidence, had to lose her composure a bit with Jon offering 200,000 gold coins in a bet while her family looked at Jon as if he had grown a new head. 1,000 gold coins. Renly, who had remained silent, looked at Jon. All right, if you are so confident, I will give 10,000 gold coins, he exclaimed. Participants of the tournament. A herald began to call in the stands for the people who would play. Everyone had their own bow. Jon asked them not to use weirwood bows, as it could be claimed they had superior weapons, so they took their regular bows. I will win, Arya exclaimed and pointed at Renly. You better get the money ready, she declared, and although many expected the prince to be offended by this, he laughed. Ha ha! I look forward to seeing that. Lady Stark, let's see your performance then, he said as Arya began to descend from the podium and joined the other competitors, with Eldrich keeping her safe from anyone who might bother her. Not that anyone would mess with a legitimate daughter of a high noble of Westeros, but there was still mockery, having a child competing among them. The tournament was open to anyone who could pay the entry fee, although the Articans could only have 2 participants because they didn't belong to this kingdom. Not that Jon was worried about that, as he could still showcase the glory of his realm. The space was huge, with targets that could be moved at various distances, starting the tournament with the closest and increasing the distance as more and more people were eliminated until only the last one remained. People were getting excited while Renly asked for wine and talked to Loras. The nobles, dressed in their fine clothes, conversed among themselves in the reserved areas, watching the preparations and placing bets on who would win the tournament, wondering if Jon would leave 200,000 coins poorer. Among the commoners, the atmosphere was one of pure celebration. They crowded in the open areas, eating caramel apples and drinking whatever they had in their hands, cheering and shouting in anticipation of the event. The Articans were not left behind, as the dwarves distributed all kinds of expensive drinks among them. The bards were scattered throughout the arena, trying to earn some coins, especially from the nobles. A bard approached Jon's podium. King of Artica, it is a pleasure to meet you. Could you listen to a song? He asked, catching Jon's attention while the judges were examining the competitors' bows. Yes. Jon nodded, curious to know what a bard from Westeros would sing for him. You know, I met you a long time ago, and you caught my attention from that day. Every story about you, I always listened carefully, so it is an honor to meet you. Let me start my song, one that I learned many years ago, he said, and began to play his lute. North of Torrance Square, where winter makes everyone endure, a small family lived. With their harvest so pure, they still had hope in life. An unexpected situation, one day, a lost child with mastery. His appearance enchanted, magical eyes. Green charm, imploring God's blessing, mesmerized. The boy negotiated for a map, with eyes turned north in a trade that shook. A pact made between the families. With hands in the earth, a harvest would start, green and vast, larger than rumored. Ow! Little Jon, with a hand in the earth, wealth would come. Ow! Little Jon, even before the situation, Eagle Eyes saw him as a flame in the dark. Ow! Little Jon, with his small stature, nothing stopped him. Ow! Little Jon, with courage and effort, he protected those he loved. Ow! Little Jon, with a bow, wrongdoers wept. Ow! Little Jon, blessed with horse, eagle, and giant wolves, his claws haunted. His legend made any bandit tremble in their pants. Ow! Little Jon, with great surprise, the farm celebrated, but faced with abundance. Danger appeared, a disaster. When the boy showed his swordsmanship, his eagle screamed, threats approached. Jon was frightened by something so horrible. Thus was born the battle of 12 bandits, 5 farmers, and a boy. The boy was scared, while farmers asked him to flee. But Jon refused to depart. With a horse to the east he moved. Farmers hoped that, in the future, it would be said that the boy survived. 12 bandits in ecstasy. With the farm in sight, they ran, facing fatally trembling farmers. The leader of the bandits smiled wickedly. 12 horses trotted toward the farm in a singular manner. The ground feared as farmers sweated, fearing for their home. But not all was lost. In the face of danger, something happened. The euphoria of the bandits ceased. Their horses fell to the ground, surprised. In the situation, all stunned, without reaction, a horse's laugh echoed, and a boy at the feet revealed himself. With eyes near death, they announced, strength and magic finally unveiled. Ow! Little Jon, with a hand in the earth, wealth would come. Ow! Little Jon, even before the situation, Eagle Eyes saw him as a flame in the dark. Ow! Little Jon, with his small stature, nothing stopped him. Ow! Little Jon, with courage and effort, he protected those he loved. Ow! Little Jon, with a bow, wrongdoers wept. Ow! Little Jon, blessed with horse, eagle, and giant wolves, his claws haunted. His legend made any bandit tremble in their pants. Ow! Little Jon, with 3 bandits out of the fight, now 9 remained. They showed themselves enraged. With Jon determination and mind they strained. Grabbing his bow, he would show with mastery that he could handle. The bandits attacked in fury, but an arrow interrupted them with bravery. At 80 meters away, an 8-named-day-old boy would cause nausea. For, even a boy, he hit the first one who deserved. Scared, the anger continued. But the boy did not stop. With arrows he launched. 2 more he hit precisely. Attacking another one, his arrows ran out. In danger, his animals helped him. His eagle saved him from death, and his horse led the bandit to fate. Without energy, the boy stood. But seeing his friends in danger, he did not stop. With his horse, he mounted. Seeing distracted enemies, he trotted. In a leap, with his little sword, another he killed. Without energy, his end was certain. But the magnitude of the giant wolf, from the ancient legends of the North, revived clever. Ow! Little Jon, with a hand in the earth, wealth would come. Ow! Little Jon, even before the situation, Eagle Eyes saw him as a flame in the dark. Ow! Little Jon, with his small stature, nothing stopped him. Ow! Little Jon, with courage and effort, he protected those he loved. Ow! Little Jon, with a bow, wrongdoers wept. Ow! Little Jon, blessed with horse, eagle, and giant wolves, his claws haunted. His legend made any bandit tremble in their pants. Ow! Little Jon. The place became quite silent as Jon looked at him surprised. The song he hadn't heard since the Frost Roar Square more than 6 years ago. Marjorie, who loved this song when she was little, looked at Jon with admiration in her eyes. Even Loras admitted that he loved this song when he was younger with his sister. This is unexpected, Jon said. Give him 1,000 gold coins for doing this. Jon requested while the nobles were shocked at Jon giving so much money for a song. Thank you very much. The bard was extremely shocked by this. While accepting the money, Jon nodded and turned to a royal guard. Don't let anyone else get close. I don't want a bunch of bards here asking for more money. Jon warned and watched the man leaving with all that money after an Artican tossed the sack of coins. Also, keep an eye on him. I feel something is wrong with him, and I don't want him to die from people trying to rob him. When that happens, bring him to the camp. Jon warned, and his royal guard spoke to someone else who called for another guard, and the two followed the man. Ladies and gentlemen, the herald called again while everyone paid attention to him, ending all their conversations. All the competitors are ready, so let's start the tournament. I hope you enjoy and are satisfied with our champions, he exclaimed while the group of archers began to step forward with their bows in hand and arrows in their quivers. The first targets appeared at 20 meters. Among them, Eldrich had a puffed chest and a confident look. The smallest person among them, looking like a dwarf, Arya was there in the middle with a fearless posture, ready to aim her bow and easily hit the target. Go Arya! Go little one! Arya! The Articans soon took over the sound of the stands as men, dwarves, and even giants cheered for the 11-year-old Arya Stark. Raccoon here. The atmosphere in the arena quickly grew and was boiling with excitement. What was initially thought to be a rather boring competition by everyone, especially the nobility, took a turn when a child decided to participate. It was a girl from the high nobility, adding to the thrilling bet between Jon Artica and Renly with Olenna. People developed a new perspective on this contest, capturing their attention. Father, do you think the Articans will win this competition? Desmara Redwine asked, her gaze admiring Jon as she saw her knight on a white horse. I don't know, but it certainly has become interesting. But will that Artican archer truly prove the confidence the Artican king has in him? Paxter Redwine commented, our brother is competing, but I don't think he will win. Desmara didn't hesitate to comment. You think our brother can't win? He is the best archer in all of Arbor. Horus, the heir, defended his twin. Don't be hasty, Horus. Your brother is certainly a great archer, the best in our family, but the field is full of skilled ones. Our knights are very skilled, whether with a lance, a sword, or a bow and arrow. Paxter Redwine said with a tone of lesson. Meanwhile, many conversations were happening around the stands. Arya Stark competing in a tournament made for men and commoners. That is certainly wild. She seems to have truly become one after traveling beyond the wall. A lady mocked, though they were no longer claiming Jon had kidnapped her. It seems that despite her blossoming beauty, she is not all that. Another lady from a social circle that Arya and Serena did not know mocked, seeing the little girl in the crowd. But this was not limited to unknown ladies. Even those who had met Arya and talked to her in the past days looked at it with disapproval. However, if Arya knew their thoughts, she would drop the lady posture her brother always demanded of her and call them stupid, despite feeling embarrassed by Jon's nicknames and how the nobles found it ridiculous. But she would never give up her war skills, no matter what people said. Now, let's all get to your positions before shooting your first arrow. The judge shouted as the target was seen. It was a tree trunk set diagonally. This was the eliminatory test, as there were at least 300 competitors among them. And before 50 meters, those who missed would be disqualified until the real competition with center targets began. Arya walked alongside Eldrich the entire time, hearing the dwarves and even giants cheering for her with the Artican men and women. I'm jealous, princess. You have an audience, and I don't. Eldrich commented with a smile, pretending to be sad. They all know you will win this competition. Arya commented in response. Or will our princess surprise us today? He retorted as Arya gave a small smile. I hope so, Arya admitted, wanting to show her training and even win the competition to show off to Ygritte. Lady Arya, you are stunning. A voice emerged next to Arya, and she looked at a young noble, even older than Jon. Who are you? She asked, raising an eyebrow, while the young man seemed disconcerted by this. Lady Arya, I am Habba Redwine. I tried to invite you to dance at the banquet, but you were indisposed. He spoke. Oh yes. What do you want, Lord Redwine? Arya asked again with a formal tone, leaving no opening. I just want to know how you were. If you needed any tips, after all, I am an experienced archer and will most likely win this competition. He said, trying to boast. I am fine, Lord Redwine. Thank you for your concern. She spoke dryly as she resumed walking, leaving the noble unsure of how to respond. Our princess is being courted even in a competition. Eldrich commented beside her, laughing at the child. TSK, do you think my future husband will be a southerner? Arya spoke with conviction. She preferred to remain single for the rest of her life rather than leave Artika or Jon. I understand. Anyway, good luck, Eldrich said, and they began to position themselves. There were at least 9 trunks where their goal was to land the arrow on them. To identify the arrows, all of them had a symbol on their rear ends so they could be recognized by the judges who would analyze them. The symbols represented nobles with the designs of their houses, while commoners who had the money to pay for the entry created their own. Arya and Eldrich had the Artican symbol at the end of their arrows, which were also dyed with white paint. Everyone, prepare to shoot the first arrow, the judge shouted, and everyone placed the arrow on the bow and pulled it back while aiming at the target only 20 meters away. While almost all of the 300 people raised the target slightly upward and pulled the string with just enough force to hit the target, Arya and Eldrich, along with a few other southern archers, pulled the string with great strength and aimed straight, relying on their power to hit the target. She can pull a bow? How strong is this girl? Olenna on her podium couldn't be more shocked, seeing Arya pulling that bow without seeming to struggle. This is certainly surprising, Marjorie commented, knowing she could never do something that a child a few years younger than her was doing with some ease. Do you think she will go far? Serena asked. She will, but she won't beat all the Southerners, Jon said, watching the position that all 300 competitors were handling their bows from, having an aerial view from hundreds of meters away with his 2 eagles. Jon decided to share his thoughts. There are at least 2 Southerners who will be a challenge for Eldrich. Jon spoke, having seen and known many legendary archers in the world's history and recognizing when someone handled the bow like an excellent archer. You're not going to lose 200 million, are you? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Do you think I would bet to lose? We will be 20,000 gold coins richer by the end of this competition, Jon said with a small smile to his wife. Let's begin shoot, the judge suddenly shouted. In the next moment, the sound of hundreds of arrows with the noise of the strings snapping was heard, but not very loud as they didn't put much force with a target so close. Arya shot her arrow, which flew at high speed along with Eldrich's, covering that small distance before hitting the wood and exploding out the other side, revealing its tip embedded in the wood, while the arrow seemed to tremble from the impact. Another Artican arrow was embedded beside it, qualifying the 2. But not all news was good, as 80 arrows fell outside the target, missing the wood, most of them from commoners and some inexperienced young nobles. This was much worse for the commoners, who had come here to try their luck and spent much of their small savings to enter the tournament, missing either from nervousness or sheer bad luck. She did it, King Artican. Renly clapped for Arya, seeing her hit a target. Even for a target so close, a little lady doing something like this was impressive to many people, even those who looked down on it. Don't be too surprised. She will pass the entire elimination phase, Jon replied to Renly with confidence. I'd like to see that, Renly said, displaying a smile while taking his bottle of wine. The competitors stood still while the judges checked the symbols on the arrows that fell off target, calling out names for them to withdraw, as they couldn't cheat this part due to the symbols pinned to their chests as identification. Fred out, the judge began calling. I hit it. My arrow just bounced and didn't stick in the wood, a commoner protested. You're out? Leave here, the judge demanded again with a severe tone. No, I refuse. I spent all my parents' savings to be here. I will win this competition. The commoner refused to leave. Guards, take him away, the judge ordered, and some Tyrell guards quickly approached the commoner, surprised by this and starting to drag him out while he tried to break free until he disappeared as the crowd commented on the event. Mick out, the judge ordered another commoner to leave. Jelion Foresty out, the judge said to a commoner representing his house. He was the same age as Arya and had to leave, looking at Arya with anger since he had lost her girl. It was something to be ashamed of. After all, the nobles began mocking Jillian's parents, saying that their son couldn't even beat a little girl. And it wasn't just him. As the nobles were eliminated, they became the butt of jokes from their peers, while Arya had hit her target, having 2 Artican arrows embedded in one of the trunks. The judge continued eliminating competitors, leading to some fights and arguments where the guard were called in by the sore losers. Then the competition resumed, and the trunks had the arrows removed. Some men organizing this had difficulty extracting the Artican arrows, wondering how they embedded so deeply into the wood. Now the target was 30 meters away. "Prepare to shoot," the judge shouted again as all 220 people aimed their bows. Once again, the spectators watched with anticipation to see who would advance in what had become more than a common archery game. "Shoot," the judge shouted as the sound seemed louder than before, with hundreds of arrows flying, most hitting the wood, but 50 arrows falling off target. Once again, 2 Artican arrows were embedded in the wood. "She's really good." Allery couldn't help but praise Arya, standing beside her husband Mace, with Arya's second success. "That's it, Arya. She did it. I knew she would." The Articans shouted their support for Arya, who smiled at them with this encouragement. The judge again announced who had been eliminated, and once again there was outrage before the guards had to be called, even taking one to prison after he punched a guard. The nobles who were eliminated again looked at Arya with anger, starting a reputation that they would lose to her. "Stupid," Arya commented, looking at those idiots and shrugging. The targets were moved another 10 meters back, now 40 meters away. "I don't think she will win this one." "King Artican," Renly commented. 1,000 gold coins, how about it?" Jon asked, and Renly nodded. "All right, 1,000 gold coins," he said, wanting to bet. "Prepare to shoot," the judge exclaimed, and everyone raised their bows, even Arya and Eldrich, as they didn't have weirwood bows, which were far superior to these in their hands. "Shoot," the judge ordered, and a new volley, larger than the last, was launched, with most hitting the target and 70 arrows, more than before, missing and those competitors about to be eliminated. "Looks like I won a 1,000 gold dragons, Prince Renly," Jon said, while Renly, having no choice, tossed a sack of coins to Jon under the watchful eyes of the nearby nobles. "Impressive. I never imagined seeing a girl with such archery skills. Maybe she will really pass the eliminations," Renly exclaimed cheerfully despite losing money, as the competition seemed increasingly interesting with the child showing her skills and remaining while 2/3 had been eliminated. After the judge eliminated the 70 competitors, the herald returned to the stands and podiums. "As you can see, we now have 100 competitors for the final elimination round, among them many famous archers of the kingdom, our Artican guests, and among these 2 foreign guests, we have Arya of House Stark, only 11 years old, hitting a target at 40 meters, he exclaimed, knowing this would draw much attention. Many rounds of applause erupted from the nobles. Despite their disdain, they couldn't deny the skills this girl had shown, standing out among the majority of adults who had been eliminated. "I knew the North had women who took up arms, but I never imagined they knew how to produce archers," a noble had to admit to his peers. "Looks like the Honorable Eddard Stark knows how to raise a daughter," another said. "You know, she's been to this place called Artica, so I don't think she learned her skills at Winterfell. I heard that Caitlin of House Tully raises her daughter strictly to become a lady and even queen of the 7 kingdoms. I don't think she would allow her youngest daughter with a bow when she follows the 7 to the point of building a sept in the heart of the North." Another noble, a more sensible one, spoke calmly. The discussions continued about Arya, while the commoners commented, and the Articans made noise for the girl who laughed. She had impressed many there, and Jon knew she could do much more than that. Now, let's move on to the last competition of the eliminations. "At 50 meters, the herald shouted, while the judge prepared to command the next task. As soon as the targets were set at 50 meters, the wood full of holes, he turned back to the competitors. "Prepare bows and aim," he said as 100 bows were raised in the air. "Shoot," he demanded as everyone was ready, and an explosive sound emerged with 100 arrows flying, the sound of them hitting the wood being at least half of them. She hit it. Marjorie was surprised to see 2 white arrows, which were the Artican ones. Yes, she hit it. Olenna couldn't help but comment, surprised by that. Arya was much more skilled than she had imagined. "Let's see who is in the final round," the herald exclaimed once more as the judges checked the arrows that fell. 52 competitors are eliminated, leaving only 48. One of them being Lady Stark, remaining with her skills, he shouted again as the judge removed all those who lost. People clapped, some even cheering for Arya, while some nobles who lost continued to be mocked for the same reason as the previous ones. Now let's set up our targets, the man exclaimed as the servants went to fetch dozens of targets with circles. Here the competition was much more difficult, as it required hitting the center for better points or the second circle. Missing it meant elimination. As the targets were set up, the judge asked everyone to get ready while they aimed their bows at the 60-meter targets. Arya aimed at her target and felt the wind with the pressure as she pulled the string, knowing the weight and shooting capacity of the common bow. Fire! She heard the judge and released the bow smoothly, watching her arrow shoot up, swaying in the air like a serpent, flying far along the imagined line. It kept rising until it started descending, heading towards the target and embedding in its center. The sound of arrows hitting the painted wood was heard, and now everyone was shocked, not only by Eldrich's precise target, but also by Arya's. The two Articans remained strong in this contest. Arya Stark hit a 60-meter target with perfect precision, the herald shouted, leaving everyone astonished. Silence took over the place, while Jon started clapping first. Very well, as expected, Jon said firmly, making sure his voice was heard by everyone. The Articans started making noise again, cheering for Arya, and the nobles had a clap, though they were surprised by this. 6 competitors were eliminated. We have 42 left for a 70-meter target, the herald shouted to the audience. All the competitors who made it past the eliminations were excellent archers, so it was no surprise that most of them started hitting the target, but the challenges were just beginning. Father, how could she be so good with the bow? I want to do the same. I want to train too, Desmara demanded while Lord Redwine didn't know what to think. His son was stunned in the middle of the competition, seeing it get harder with the girl still there. Prepare and aim, the judge demanded again. Shoot! The arrows flew towards the 70-meter target. The 2 Artican arrows embedded in the target again, while 12 others fell outside the middle circle or even off the target. She hit it again, the man shouted to the audience, who seemed to absorb this better and started clapping for Arya Stark, with some even cheering for the girl. Damn, what do they do in Artica to make a child lethal with a bow? She could take down at least a dozen men before they reached her. Garland commented, stunned. Garland, you heard before about the Bard song, playing the Ballad of Little John, where an 8-year-old boy hits bandits from dozens of meters away. Willis said to his brother, Damn, I still thought that was a fantasy. Garland murmured, She is drawing a lot of attention. Serena commented, as there were 30 competitors left. She likes to show off, so she must be enjoying the attention she's getting. Jon couldn't help but comment. 80 meters. Can anyone stop this girl? Already one of the best archers in the kingdom present here, the herald urged the audience. Prepare and aim, the judge shouted, and Arya focused again, forgetting all the noise around her, while the only sound she could hear was her breathing as she tried to control it. Shoot! The 30 arrows flew again as the wind didn't seem to help, pushing some off target, while others already anticipated this to aim without being hindered by the wind, embedding 12 in the target while 18 arrows fell outside. She hit it again, Olenna murmured with closed lips. Mother! How is it possible she hit an 80-meter target? Mace sought answers like a lost child. Even I don't know, Mace. Just be quiet and let's watch. That was the only thing Olenna said without calling her son an idiot. 12 competitors left, and among them a child, the herald shouted as the crowd went wild once again. Prepare bows and aim, the judge ordered, and everyone did so. Shoot! The arrows flew, and once again, 2 Artican arrows hit the target, although Arya almost missed the first circle. If people were surprised by Arya passing the eliminations, surpassing 250 people, seeing her among the last 5 competitors was extremely shocking for everyone. Even the judge looked at the child with a furrowed brow, but he had to continue the competition. Target at 100 meters. Prepare to shoot, he shouted, and everyone aimed their bows. Shoot, he exclaimed, and the 5 shot. 4 arrows hit the middle circle, while the last one missed by a bit. This middle-aged man looked disappointed and turned to the child, not knowing what to think, losing to someone almost 4 times younger, despite his fame. 4 competitors. We have only 4 left, and our competitor is still in, the herald shouted. Arya Stark. The people shouted for her, especially the commoners. The Lady of the Bow, someone exclaimed, and this nickname seemed to stick as everyone started shouting her name in the next moment. The Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow. Yes, the Lady of the Bow hit 100 meters. Now the competition will be in increments of 5 meters, with the next being 105 meters away, the herald announced, and the judge waited for the servants to set the target 5 meters from the last position. Prepare bows and aim, the judge shouted, while Arya looked at her target at a very long distance, but she was still focused and confident that she would hit it. Shoot, the judge commanded, and the arrows flew, hitting all the targets in their circle. All hit the targets at the same time, the herald announced. Now let's move to 110 meters. The Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow. The people kept calling for Arya the entire time. Prepare to shoot and aim. Everyone heard the judge's voice, and he gave the next command. Shoot. The 4 arrows flew into the air until 3 hit the target, and 1 white arrow fell beside it, missing. Arya Stark was eliminated at 110 meters, the herald shouted as Arya looked disappointed at losing. Girl, I've never seen anyone like you. Don't be sad. You put all the other competitors behind you, remember that. One of the competitors looked at the girl and spoke to encourage her. Even he had to recognize that this girl was a prodigious talent, or something like that, for surviving and hitting targets up to 105 meters away. The Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow, the Lady of the Bow. The crowd seemed not to care much that she had lost, fervently applauding her for finishing in 4th place, which no one there had expected. Jon stood smiling proudly at his sister while Serena clapped. Many nobles who had looked down on her in this competition couldn't deny her skills at that moment, and everyone seemed excited that she had brought some lively competition to a generally tedious game. I think I'll go now. Good luck, Arya said to Eldrich as she began to leave. Thank you, Princess. I will bring victory to Artica by the end of this competition. Eldrich smiled and spoke confidently. Let's see if you're as good as you say, Artican. One of the competitors said, with only 3 left now, aiming at a 115-meter target. Now we have in the field Ser Gawain Florent, Lord Stervo Oakheart, and Eldrich of Artica, the herald announced as everyone applauded. I'm already surprised by your sister's skills. I'm starting to think your archer will win this competition, and I'll have lost 11,000 gold dragons today. Renly commented with a smile more forced than sincere. 11,000 gold coins was not a small amount, even for the Prince of Westeros. I promise to spend that money very well, Prince Renly, if that's what you fear. Jon joked, as defeat didn't seem like an option for him, making Renly smile even more forced. Prepare bows and aim, the judge shouted as the place fell silent, with nobles and commoners holding their breath for the next move. Shoot! The 3 arrows flew into the distance and began to fall. The sound of what being hit was heard twice, while 1 arrow fell outside, belonging to Ser Gawain Florent. I lost, damn it! Ser Gawain Florent shouted angrily, breaking his bow over his knee in a fit of rage. He left frustrated, stomping on the grass as he exited. Now we have the best archer in the Reach, Lord Stervo Oakheart. This man was very famous for his skills, so no one was surprised by his reaching the final. And as his opponent, we have the greatest archer of Artica, Eldrich, the herald lied, as he said this without knowing who the greatest archer in Artica was. He just wanted to draw attention. Jon saw that Stone was about to disagree, shouting about the poor man, and almost saw the giant protesting with him. But Stone stayed in place despite his face wanting to tell the man who the best archer in Artica really was. Now we have 120 meters. Who will win the competition? The herald announced again, leading the audience to mostly cheer for Lord Oakheart, while only the Articans were left to cheer for Eldrich. Arya was already next to Jon, a bit sweaty, shouting for Eldrich to win. Prepare bows and aim. The judge announced again. Shoot. The 2 arrows hit the target at 120 meters. Incredible, both hit. Our field only goes up to 130 meters. Will they surpass the limit? This looks incredible, the herald said as the target was now at 125 meters. Everyone stopped shouting as they watched the 2 archers position themselves. Aim bows, the judge shouted. No one could breathe now, as time seemed to stop with the 2 archers who had confidence on their faces. Shoot! The 2 arrows flew into the sky before starting to descend at a distance, with one white arrow embedding in the center of the target and the other falling outside its target. The people were in complete silence as the white arrow embedded itself in the target's center from 125 meters away. With the archers standing so far apart, they seemed like ants. The white arrow still wobbled from the impact and spun several times before finally coming to a stop, firmly fixed in place, while the opponent's arrow lay on the ground. As expected, Eldrich. Beautiful shot. The place was silent as the herald was still processing what was happening. The one who broke this silence a moment later was Jon's own voice, laden with magic, resonating throughout the place as he spoke normally, startling many unsuspecting people with his deep tone. The herald himself gave a little jump as he realized his own silence and turned back to the completely mute audience to announce the victory. As you can see, the victory belongs to the archer of Artica, Eldrich, who scored with a shot from 125 meters, a shot that few people in the history of this continent have managed to make. So let's give our congratulations to today's champion, Eldrich of Artica, he exclaimed, raising his arms in a theatrical manner, which snapped everyone out of their daze and prompted them to start clapping. Very good, Eldrich, Arya shouted excitedly, and all the Articans did the same. Ha ha! Very good, man. You show them what Artica is made of. A dwarf shouted. Eldrich. Stone spoke the name as his way of congratulating. Aha, very good. But I would have done better with my axe. Tormund shouted while holding a bottle of mead. You red-haired idiot. Would you really have hit the first target in the preliminaries? A dwarf mocked. Don't doubt me, dwarf. I am the king of the axe. Tormund spoke drunkenly before a dwarf threw a jug of beer at him. Do you see this, Prince Renly? It seems I want a few thousand gold coins. Jon grinned as he turned his attention back to the man, who looked at him with a forced smile, realizing he was losing money at that moment. It was a fantastic archer, king of Artica. I'm impressed, and our bet was worth it, but it's not just me you've won against, right, Olenna? He turned his attention to the Tyrell family beside him. Well, this old woman can't win every time. It seems our guests proved why there was so much confidence in their archer. She commented while her family just listened in silence. It wasn't as if 10,000 gold coins made much difference, so Olenna just laughed softly. The nobles around the place clapped, recognizing the Artican archer's skills, who proved worthy of being champion with his arrow still embedded in the target. The commoners were even more excited as they seemed to celebrate, with the bards already preparing songs about this exciting tournament and the bet the king of Artica had made with Prince Renly in the Tyrell house. Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica. People began chanting, the crowd calling out only one name at that moment. You did it, boy. Congratulations on the shot. The judge beside Eldrich praised him, and Eldrich nodded, satisfied. You really proved it. I had never hit a target at 120 meters, but I wasn't lucky with the farthest one. I still wonder if you could keep hitting the targets at this pace. Ser Oakhart spoke beside Eldrich, not failing to praise his splendid, accurate shot. Thank you, Ser. As for whether I could continue, maybe yes, he replied with a smile, not directly confirming it. Anyway, a good game. I hope to see you at the banquet tonight, he said, and Eldrich nodded, as he was practically the guest of honor, though he knew that in games like these, champions were quickly forgotten. The applause finally began to die down as Eldrich returned to his group, who seemed more excited than anyone else. Very well, you really showed them. They shouted excitedly. Yes, he said and returned to Jon, kneeling. My king, I dedicate this victory to the honor of Artica, as it should always be. He said, Your subject doesn't kneel to you? Renly looked at this curiously, and thinking about it now, he had never seen any of the soldiers kneeling to Jon. I did not demand that of them, Prince Renly. Jon smiled and continued. After all, I made a law that no one should kneel to anyone, not even their king. Jon spoke, drawing attention to his words from all the non-Artican nobles. The people of Artica are strong and hardy. They do not kneel to anyone, not even their king. For the king of Artica, respect is enough. Jon spoke in a serious tone. Artica, 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 Artica. Amidst the common people's shouts calling Eldrich, the Articans began to fervently shout, boosting their morale with the name of their kingdom. Well, you are certainly unique, King of Artica. Will we see you at the banquet? Renly asked. After all, it was still mid-afternoon, around 2 p.m., since the tournament lasted about 3 hours. Do you think my champion won't be there? Jon said with a small smile. That's great. I'll look forward to seeing you tonight then. Renly said, and Jon nodded. Renly began to rise with Loras following him. Then I'll be off. I'll be in my room until the banquet, he said as he left, after saying goodbye to the Tyrell family. Let's go as well. This tournament was much better than expected, but we better prepare for the banquet too. Olenna instructed her grandchildren. But mother, Mace said, not wanting to leave this place like that. After all, he was the honoree here. He should be the center of attention, but that was stolen with the presence of both Jon and Renly with their bets, or even Eldrich himself, who was on everyone's lips as the best archer many had ever seen. As the Tyrell family began to leave after Renly Baratheon, the great houses began to leave as well. I would like everyone's attention. Mace, being the only one present from his family, wanted to at least make a speech for the nobles and crowd. Even so, families like Hightower, Redwine, and Tarly began to leave their podiums, seeing no more reason to stay there, and went to prepare for the banquet, ignoring all of Mace Tyrell's words. Father, that archer is really good. Could I be like that too? Dickon Tarly asked his father as the Tarly family began to leave the place. You will not be an archer. You will command the archers. Worry first about having competent men like that, and having the capacity to lead them before trying to achieve such a shot. Randall Tarly, the Lord of Horn Hill, spoke sternly. They were from a family of commanders, not skilled archers. He spoke this way to Dickon because he trusted and placed all his hopes that he would lead the family after him. But Dickon was about to speak, but was interrupted by his father with a raised hand to stop this subject. His gaze fell on his eldest son and current heir, Samwell, a chubby boy who noticed his father's gaze and shrank back, seeing Randall Tarly looking at him with a glimmer of disappointment, even disgust and repulsion. Samwell knew his father had such thoughts about him and didn't know what to do, or was too cowardly to face him firmly. Lady Melessa and Tala Tarly seemed oblivious to the small interaction between the men of the family and the real meanings behind Randall's words to Dickon. Let's go as well. We need to celebrate in the camp before going to the castle, as is the local etiquette, Jon said as he began to rise, his wife accompanying him along with his sister. The Artican group began to move as well, while the giants scared the nobles in the stands. After all, they even surpassed the height of some parts. They headed for the camp, passing through the crowd that still seemed not to have forgotten the Artican victory. Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica, Eldrich of Artica. They shouted as Eldrich mounted a horse and waved to the crowd with his bow on his back. They headed to their tent with the people, even with the crowd now dispersed, with people and guard from other camps talking to each other, already knowing the tournament's outcome. Jon arrived at his camp with a group that stayed to guard it, and they welcomed him with excited smiles. From what we're hearing even from here, Eldrich is our champion then, my king. The Artican soldiers asked as soon as he arrived. You didn't even need to ask that. Jon shrugged and looked seriously at them. How many did you catch? 8 people trying to rob us. Recognized some from the camps of those nobles. Also caught 2 of those tongueless children we found in Dorne. He spoke in a much more serious tone. We'll deal with the nobles later, but those children are Varys's. It seems that guy thinks he can sneak past us after what happened in Dorne. Jon mocked. After that, they entered the camp, and Jon saw the 2 guards he had asked to keep an eye on the bard who delivered 1,000 gold dragons, along with the bard himself, who looked terrified. What happened? Jon asked, raising an eyebrow. They tried to rob him 3 times. We had no choice but to bring him here where he was safer. The Artican guard said, Sorry for that, King of Artica. I couldn't even see the splendid tournament, where I wanted to compose some songs in your honor. The bard said, ashamed and nervous. I guess I shouldn't have given so much money. Jon murmured, Find a place for him to stay for a few days, but he is forbidden from getting near any important information. Jon said, wanting to give him a chance to live. Jon, there's something wrong with this bard. It's better to keep an eye on him. Serena approached Jon at that moment and nodded. Despite appearing at a disadvantage, the man always seemed to think carefully before saying anything, and he looked like a Dornishman. Yes, I was happy to hear such music after so many years, but he seems like a Dornishman, a spy of Doran specifically, but let him be for now until we find some proof. I will keep an eye on him the whole time. Jon said, but didn't deny leaving him there. He knew the man would either lead him to his informant or to the Raven tonight, saying he infiltrated the camp. Now let's get ready for a party, Jon said as everyone began to move at that moment, preparing for the banquet in celebration of Eldrich, the archery champion. But he wasn't the only one. No one forgot how a certain 11-year-old girl had taken first place in the tournament. Arya, today many people will talk to you. Be presentable, my champion. Jon turned to his sister, and she nodded, smiling. Yes, Jon, she exclaimed, and went to her tent to wear an Artican dress. The party then began at the banquet in the late afternoon as Jon sat in his chair in the middle of the place with everyone in the camp laughing and having fun, with the dwarves singing as usual. Even the bard was present, observing it all. Then a moment later, he left. A moment later, Jon looked at his wife. I'm going to do something important, he said, and she nodded, staying with Arya, who was boasting about getting a high position. Jon went to the larger tent and sat there, with no one else in the place besides his guards at the entrance. A moment later, a group entered, dragging the bard roughly. What is this? Stop it! The bard exclaimed as he was thrown to the ground, landing a few meters from Jon. He looked at Jon, smiling, and frowned. King of Artica, that's not what your men were doing. I just had to go out to handle something. He began to explain as Jon kept a smile. You know, I thought about leaving you unprotected. It would be easy to let you die while they try to rob you. 1,000 gold coins must be more than Doran or whoever from the Martell family has ever paid you, right? Unfortunately, if I let you die, I wouldn't be able to find out the things I wanted. Jon asked and spoke calmly. Doran? I don't know what you're talking about. King of Artica, you're a person I've always admired, he said, almost pleading. Really? Jon raised an eyebrow before turning his gaze to his soldier. Give me the letter then, he asked, and one of the guards took it out of his pocket, already aware of everything, seeing through his owl. Look what we have here, dear serpent. I am infiltrated in the Artican camp. I will send precise information as soon as I discover more about the place. Jon read in a calm tone and then turned to mock the Dornishman. You know, getting caught on the first day makes you a terrible spy. You could have waited a few days. You would have done better, Jon said, as it was quite obvious that the dear serpent was Doran or another Martell. I swear I am not a spy. King of Artica, he exclaimed. Come on, answer me. You called the serpent a she. Does that mean this is Ilaria, which I doubt, as she is not a serpent, which leaves me only with Princess Arya Martell? Jon said with a small smile. There was Nyra, but she wouldn't identify herself as a snake. She wouldn't spy on his camp, maybe on him, but not the camp. The man trembled, seeing he was increasingly without escape. I swear I had no intention of informing anything that would compromise your majesty, he said, almost crying from nerves. Take him to the cell, Jon ordered while the men nodded, Jon remaining there with the letter in his hand. Arianne, you want to spy on me? I thought we had nothing to do with each other after I refused to marry you. Jon murmured quietly. But you've proven to be bolder than I had imagined. He concluded, my king, and about the 2 children, The guard asked. There are them too. Jon sighed, having to deal with spies from all sides. Throw them in the cells too, until we figure out what to do. Tomorrow, release one of the children and follow it to find its bird. Jon ordered, and the man nodded, leaving the tent and leaving Jon alone. He watched him leave and just closed his eyes, his mind going to a distant place, seeing himself in a city much less fragrant than Highgarden could be, King's Landing. He still kept 3 birds there to act as his spies. He heard the meeting when Renly was chosen to participate in the tournament and get in touch with Jon, or when Cersei tried to provoke the royal court that accompanied Renly and openly mocked Jon, not expecting retaliation from Tormund, who had won. His raven began to fly over the Red Keep, ignoring all other targets, focusing on one in particular. Varys was commanding the air on his balcony while writing a small letter. He felt a raven perch near his tree and stared at Varys in an unusual way, tilting its head from side to side without taking its eyes off the Master of Whispers. A raven, Varys murmured, taking his attention off his little parchment and raising an eyebrow at it the next moment. He said nothing, just put the parchment away and began to leave the window, opening a secret door in his room with a glance back at the raven sitting on his window, staring at him the whole time as if it had no fear. The door finished opening while he was frowning, and he immediately entered, pressing something from the inside, closing it behind him. He was even a little startled by the raven simply jumping and flying toward the last crack of the door above Varys. But in the end, it couldn't get through, hitting the door as it closed. Jon opened his eyes at that moment, staying calm. Varys, it seems you already know me, but you still send your spies. If you want to play, so be it, Jon said while Varys was walking through secret corridors, with a second raven in the dark, following him, trying not to alert the Master of Whispers as he walked through the castle's secret passages. This Westerosi people are very persistent. It seems I have to do something very big here, otherwise I will have to deal with small mosquitoes all the time. And this will happen in Essos too. Jon murmured. He knew there was an appropriate way for him to act here, one that would make all of Westeros tremble. He then planned to do something very big as soon as he left Highgarden. This would send a good message to Westeros and its manipulators. Jon finally left the tent and went to where the party was still ongoing. He walked until he found one of the royal guards in the area. Are the wagons prepared? Jon asked. Yes, my king. Everything is ready for the castle. He replied. That's good. Let's inform my queen, sister, ministers, and our champion to accompany us. Jon said, and went to Serena. He quickly announced that he would be leaving and that they should enjoy themselves and take care of the camp. After that, his group headed for the wagons, which quickly started moving as they did for the previous banquet, to participate in another one at the castle. This was to mark the end of the archery tournament, and as a preparation for the most important event of the entire tournament, the joust, in which Jon would participate, and Renly would have his champion with a rather unique, even millionaire, bet. Jon and his group traveled by carriage to the Tyrell castle. The lights shone brightly in the windows, reminiscent of the last feast Jon attended. The carriages, just like the last feast, stopped at the main entrance, where Willis Tyrell awaited to receive them once again. Willis approached, leaning on his cane, with a cordial smile on his face. Good evening, King Jon. It is an honor to welcome you again. Good to see you and your champion. He said, looking at Eldrich. Good evening, Lord Willis, Jon replied, extending his hand. It was a magnificent display this afternoon, Willis commented. I've never seen anyone hit a target at 125 meters with such precision. He smiled, and Eldrich nodded. Willis offered bread and salt to Jon once again. Jon accepted and took a bite, confirming his commitment to peace while at the castle. Please follow me. The feast is just beginning, Willis requested, and Jon followed him with his group. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the group from Artica and their champion. The Reach is honored to receive them once again in our halls. The castle's herald, who is not the tournament's herald, introduced them to everyone present. The door to the hall opened, revealing once more a hall full of nobles dressed in fine attire, conversing animatedly and savoring the food and drink, many of which were Artican. In the middle of the hall, Renly smiled, regaining his composure after losing it due to the bet won by Jon. However, he quickly resumed his diplomatic posture. "My guests, come and bring your champion," he said, extending his hand to Jon and his group. "Prince Renly." Jon greeted with a small nod before proceeding to the main table once again, with a place reserved for Eldrich himself. "So here is our champion with 125 meters. He is truly an archer anyone would want in their army." He spoke, drawing the attention of all the nobles to Eldrich. Despite the archery tournament being the weakest, an archer with such skills was enviable. "Thank you, Prince Renly. Eldrich is a talented archer, just like my sister Arya," Jon replied, casting a proud glance at Arya, who smiled shyly. "Yes, how could I forget our little archer, or, as she was called, the Lady of the Bow?" He pointed to Arya once more, making everyone look at the girl, but without the previous disdain. After all, she secured fourth place at only 11 years old, defeating many experienced adults. "I'm sure my brother, the King of Westeros, will love this story in King's Landing, seeing that the daughter of his best friend has such talent. Let's have a round of applause for her." Lady Arya showed great courage and skill, worthy of being a Stark of Winterfell, he exclaimed as the entire hall applauded her. Arya felt quite shy about it, but also proud, despite still aiming to win the tournament. "Don't rush. You should be better than Ygritte when she was this age, so be proud of yourself." Serena spoke beside her, seeming to read her thoughts. After that, the hall began to return to normal as everyone started conversing with one another, either starting topics or flattering higher nobles. The music resumed, and the atmosphere relaxed with couples heading to the dance floor, and conversations flowed animatedly. Jon and Serena were invited to dance, while Arya remained at the table, just like the last time. "Excuse me, Lady Arya." Arya heard a voice behind her, turning her attention to see two maesters approaching. She looked suspicious, and her royal guard was on alert, ready to act if any threat arose. Jon had been clear about the need for caution with the maesters. "Yes," Arya said, eyeing them warily. "I know it's inconvenient to ask this in the middle of the banquet, but we are very curious and never had the chance to speak with you. I am Maester Eldrich, and this is Maester Gerald," one of the maesters said, making a slight bow. "Good evening, Lady Arya," Maester Gerald greeted, also nodding his head. "Good evening," Arya replied, maintaining her caution. "What do you want to know?" "We are extremely intrigued by the reports of your education in Artica," said Maester Eldrich, with a genuinely interested expression. "It is unusual for a young lady, especially a noble, to have knowledge in such diverse areas as we have heard. This intrigued us to the point of coming to ask a little about this knowledge that an 11-year-old girl has acquired. If you have as much skill with the mind as you do with drawing a bowstring, perhaps we are in the presence of the greatest genius of this generation," he admitted. Arya looked at them for a moment, her gaze falling on the royal guard who raised an eyebrow, waiting for her response. She didn't see that a conversation would be bad, and her gaze fell to the front of the table, where numerous young nobles were looking at her with interest, waiting for the first opportunity to invite her to dance. But she had already refused about 4 of them so far, and they kept coming, even saying she was indisposed. Even that Redwine twin seemed insistent on her, or it seemed like he wanted to regain his pride after being outdone by this girl. Her head turned back to the maesters with a small smile. After all, they were the solution to her little problems with dancing. It was that or run to Lady Olenna, despite some good stories and her unique personality. Arya didn't like her pressure, as she wanted to find out everything about Jon and Artica with her questions. So, opening a bigger smile, she spoke to the 2 maesters. "Of course, why not? Jon always said it's important to know more than just how to be a lady," Arya replied. "That's true, Lady Arya, and that perspective is fascinating," said Maester Gerald. "Could you tell us more about the teaching methods in Artica? How did you manage to learn so many different disciplines?" he asked, wanting to know everything. Arya had to be careful not to say too much, but even so, it was a simple conversation. "Jon and others were my main teachers," Arya began, observing the maester's reactions. Jon believes that a broad education is essential. I studied mathematics, arithmetic, economics, geography, history, languages, agriculture, astronomy, alchemy, anatomy, and basic medicine. We learned from some books and also from practice. She said her wide area of knowledge with some pride. That is truly remarkable, said Maester Eldrich, remembering what Olenna had reported to him, exchanging a glance with Gerald, wondering if they should believe it or not, but they decided to test the girl. And what about languages? How many do you speak? I speak and write in several languages, including the common tongue, High Valyrian, the old tongue of the north, Et, and Dothraki, Arya replied firmly. They looked at each other once again before Maester Gerald turned back to the girl. Is it all right if I conduct a few tests? After all, I know Valyrian. He said, and Arya nodded. Can you understand me, Lady Arya? He spoke in High Valyrian. Perfectly well, Maester Gerald. If you wish, we can converse on any subject in this language. Can you keep up with me? Arya spoke, leaving the man somewhat stunned. Arya's pronunciation was even better than his. After coughing a little embarrassed, he went back to speaking in the common tongue. It would certainly be very pleasant, but my colleague does not understand much High Valyrian, and I fear he would not be able to keep up with us in this type of conversation. Maester Gerald said, not wanting to look foolish in front of the girl, and returned to speaking in a language he mastered better. That's all right, Maester. What else would you like to know? Arya said, not noticing how she had drawn the attention of the people at the table, or at least those who remained. Prince Renly had taken Marjorie to dance, and Mace had taken his wife. Olenna once again had a direct gaze at Arya with Willis by her side, just observing how the girl dealt with the gray rats wearing a few links in their chains around their necks. As for the Maesters, they couldn't help but be impressed. Eldrich leaned in a bit more. You mentioned astronomy and alchemy. Could you give us an example of what you've learned in those areas? Arya pondered for a moment, deciding how much she should reveal. In astronomy, I learned to map the stars and use them for navigation. In alchemy, I know how to create tinctures and simple potions, such as a healing balm and a solution to purify water, making it more alkaline. She responded. The nobles remained silent despite her using terms they didn't know. There were doubts about her words, and despite her confidence, it was hard to believe that a child could have as much or even more knowledge than they did in some areas. Eldrich decided to pretend he believed Arya. Incredible, Lady Arya. The education in Artica seems to be very advanced. We would very much like to exchange more knowledge with you, and, if possible, with King Jon. Arya kept her expression neutral. I will think about it. I need to discuss with Jon before making any decisions. She responded as if she were Jon's secretary. Of course, said Maester Gerald, nodding his head again. We appreciate your attention, Lady Arya. We hope to have the opportunity to talk more in the future, he said, seeing that the girl didn't seem to want to continue the conversation, until his friend touched his shoulder and looked at Arya, still not satisfied with some questions. Lady Arya, if it's not too much to ask, we would like to test a bit more of your knowledge. Just a few more simple questions from areas we also study. I specialize in mathematics, and my focus is on this kind of art. Can I test you in this area? Arya, who thought they were going to leave, nodded after reflecting a bit. All right, a few more questions. Thank you, Lady Arya. We will start with something simple. In mathematics, how would you solve the quadratic equation x superscript 2? 4x plus 4 is equal to 0. He posed a somewhat complicated exercise. You saying it like that makes it difficult. Arya began while the man started to think it was all a fraud. After all, aside from a High Valyrian language, she couldn't prove anything else. However, Arya spoke again. Do you have paper and a quill? I can answer it that way, she asked, and the man, a little surprised, looked at Gerald, who quickly took a paper, ink, and quill from his pocket in his cloak, something he always carried everywhere. After marking the equation on the paper, he handed it to Arya, who analyzed it and dipped the quill in the ink before starting to write, with a shadow passing behind her, looking curious. What's happening here, Grandma? Marjorie asked curiously while the maesters watched Arya write on the paper after she had pushed her cutlery away and placed the paper on the table to write. The maesters are testing the girl. Let's see if what she said so far is really true. Olenna commented, watching the girl with interest. Meanwhile, this movement was also noticed by Jon on the dance floor, who just looked. Will she be okay with those maesters? Serena asked while they danced. Yes, I'm sure she will be just fine, Jon said, assuring that Arya wouldn't be bothered beyond a few questions, and he was willing to let her enjoy herself while leaving the maesters quite stunned. His gaze fell on Eldrich, who had been invited to dance by a young lady who apparently liked him. Meanwhile, Arya continued scribbling on the paper. After a while, she looked satisfied and showed the maesters her results. It's a complete quadratic equation. The formula to solve it is x equals b plus or minus square root b superscript 2 for ac slash 2a. In this case, a equals 1, b equals minus 4, c equals 4. So, x equals 4 plus or minus square root 16 is 16, slash 2 equals 4 plus or minus 0, slash 2. So x equals 2. The solution is x equals 2. She explained, showing the calculation she had written on the paper to them. The maesters exchanged a stunned look. Very well, Lady Arya, said Maester Aelrich, his voice almost failing. He had never met a woman who could solve something like this, much less a girl. Regaining his composure, he continued. And in history, could you tell us who was the king who unified the 7 kingdoms of Westeros? Aegon the Conqueror, of House Targaryen, Arya replied promptly. He used his dragons to subdue 6 of the 7 kingdoms, with the exception of Dorne, which resisted for many years. Excellent, commented Maester Gerald. Now, one last question about anatomy. What is the primary function of the heart in the human body? The heart is responsible for pumping blood throughout the body, Arya explained. It sends oxygenated blood to tissues and organs and returns deoxygenated blood to the lungs to be reoxygenated. Your knowledge is truly proven, said Maester Gerald, who began to believe in Arya's background, and the Citadel would love to hear about this. Aelrich wanted to see one last thing from Arya. You know, Lady Arya, before we came here, we were discussing some questions, and since you have knowledge of astrology, as you mentioned, perhaps you could help us. He began. What we were discussing was, what is the real color of sunlight? We concluded that it is yellow. What do you think? He asked. That is absolutely wrong. Arya held back from calling them stupid at that moment. The men, though a bit surprised by this reaction, waited for her to finish her reasoning. There was an experiment conducted in ET 200 years ago where a local physicist took sunlight and reflected it through a crystal, producing 7 colors at once upon exit. She commented, drawing the attention of the entire table. 7 colors, Lady Arya? Gerald was surprised, having never heard of such a thing before. It's a bit hard to believe that sunlight has 7 colors, Lady Arya. Aelrich was skeptical about this, almost finding it absurd. Yes, 7 colors. But he didn't stop there. By painting all the colors on a circular wheel in equal parts, he spun it, which made the 7 colors form into one. She smiled while everyone raised their eyebrows, waiting for her final answer. The color that formed in the end was white. Sunlight enhances all existing colors because it has white light. She answered confidently. That. The maesters didn't know what to say after hearing this, trying to note down the entire experiment to reproduce and verify it later. Lady Arya. Gerald was about to speak when the Artican Queen arrived at that moment. Excuse me, gentlemen, but the King of Artica requires her presence for a dance. Do you mind? She said, with Arya looking at her curiously, before turning back to Jon, who was waiting for her to dance below the table. Of course, I'm going to dance with Jon, Arya said cheerfully, leaving the maesters aside, while not caring about offending some nobles after telling them she was indisposed and then going to dance with Jon. Jon calmly took his sister and led her to the dance floor. Despite their disproportionate sizes, they danced smoothly, with Arya smiling the whole time. She enjoyed dancing, but it had to be with the right person. Serena stayed at the table, just watching them without anyone else bothering her, giving them some time together. The maesters left the main table, having learned a lot but still wanting to know more. The feast continued, with Prince Renly mingling among the noble tables, being directly flattered. Jon kept dancing with Arya and returned to the table a while later, with no one managing to separate him on the dance floor, despite their attempts. After some time, Jon had gone out to get some air, leaving discreetly without anyone noticing, leaving Arya with Serena, while he found Samwell again on the balcony. Lord Tarly. Jon approached. King Jon. Samwell jumped at this. How have you been? Jon asked. I'm fine, King Jon. He seemed reluctant to face Jon. You're drunk, aren't you? Jon asked, raising an eyebrow. A little. Samwell lied, and Jon almost laughed. Rough night? Jon asked. Yes, my father. He said. Do you want to talk about it? Jon asked. How could I bother you with something like this? He murmured, thinking Jon wouldn't want to hear from someone like him. Well, it's not like I have the whole night, but I have a few minutes, so I don't mind. Jon said. Samwell looked at Jon a bit surprised and decided to open up. My father. He thinks I'm a disappointment. It seems he wants to get rid of me and try to make my brother take my place as heir. He said. That sounds bad. Jon, who thought it would be a simple problem, didn't imagine such a bad situation with Samwell Tarly's father. Are you jealous of your brother? He asked. I wouldn't say that. I don't think I would make a good lord like our ancestors. He admitted. Dickon can handle it better than I can. He said, well, don't you like books? The Citadel would be a good opportunity, of course. You would have to give up relationships like marriage and having children if that's not a problem. Jon said, I wanted to go to the Citadel. It's my dream, but my father doesn't want to see his son as a maester serving another lord. He doesn't think it's worthy of Tarly, he said. That's even more complicated. So why don't you run away to Artica? Jon asked calmly, making the man widen his eyes at him. What? Samwell seemed shocked by Jon's words. I need scholars and teachers. If you flee to Artica on one of our ships, I can guarantee a place for you, and you will receive an education that you will never get at the Citadel. Jon said with a slight smile. I don't know. Samwell was surprised and felt a glimmer of hope in his heart. After all, from everything he had heard and seen of these Articans, it seemed like a fantastic place, and he didn't know of anyone Jon had invited. If you want to come to my kingdom, you need to let me know before I leave. Anyway, I have to get back, Jon said in conclusion, and Samwell just nodded, watching the Artican king walk away at that moment. The feast continued as Jon returned to the table and exchanged many words with both Prince Renly and the Tyrell family. In the end, Jon announced that he was leaving, and they began to move. Eldrich seemed to bid farewell to the noble lady he had met and left with Jon and the others. At the exit, the Tyrell family, along with Renly, sent a chest with 20,000 gold coins for Jon to take to his camp. He accepted and started to move to rest. Meanwhile, the following day would be full of songs about the tournament by bards who wrote songs about what they witnessed and spoke of the Artican pride they had observed. Raccoon here. I will write another chapter summarizing a few more days with Jon negotiating while some things happen in the north. Starting the joust, I don't want to make this arc boring by dragging it out. While Jon was still enjoying his stay in Reach since he first set foot in the kingdom, thousands of miles away, on the opposite side of the continent to the north, specifically in front of the Vale, the Arctic fleet with its 50 ships continued sailing north again, passing through waters filled with broken and burnt wood. While the people who managed to save themselves from the wildfire explosions by some miracle were screaming, try to escape the tentacles of the people throwing them into the water. The ships continued heading north, unconcerned with the chaos happening around them, with the sea still burning with green fire on the waters. This was the result of a battle while a group seemed to want to attack them, but Jon knew their plan very well, which was to simulate an attack by the kingdom's fleet beyond the wall, while the survivors returned to Gulltown, of course, burning their own ships in the process. But Jon, already anticipating Littlefinger's plan, thought that if they want to set them up, at least it had to be for real at least. So as soon as the ships approached to have some excuse that they encountered the fleet and were returning to the port to simulate the aggression, the Arctic ships themselves took the initiative and exterminated them all. It didn't take long for the Arctic fleet to disappear to the north in the following days, and new ships to sail those waters while investigating the disappearance of Lord Gerald Grafton of Gulltown's ships. This is just destruction. What the hell happened here? Said a sailor with some fear. There was no more wildfire, so he couldn't say how all the ships were destroyed without leaving a single man or body visible in the water. Only burnt wreckage everywhere, which was very frightening for those men. We have nothing more to do here. There are no bodies anywhere. Let's just take some of the wreckage. There's a burnt mast in the water. It will be our only proof. The captain of that ship asked them to at least take what was there. No bodies, were they devoured? I've heard there are giant men on those ships. They say they devour men, so it's true, said a young man with some fear. Better leave before we are next to, said another man. And although the captain didn't believe much in that, his heart was trembling, as like the others, the idea of not finding a single dead body made him freeze, for he had never seen anything like it on the sea. But knowing that those bodies were now being consumed by stomach acids inside a huge kraken following the fleet above him. Finish taking the mast, and let's go. He gave the order, and the 3 ships that came to investigate soon turned around and went back to the port of Gulltown. What are you saying? It was after a day that they finally informed Gerald Grafton in his mansion of what they saw at sea. While the man who followed Littlefinger's plan, thinking it would be a good venture, didn't think his ships would actually be attacked. After all, there were no records of those ships attacking simple vessels. When he felt that something was wrong after days without answers, he sent the ships and received a response he didn't like at all. All the ships were destroyed without leaving any bodies in the water. The captain of one of the 3 ships reported, "Are you saying that I lost 12 ships, which is more than half of the ships my family has?" He exclaimed with fury. What seemed to be a promising venture turned into a great loss, after all. Who would guarantee that he would get back what he lost? Yes, the man murmured, not wanting to face his lord's wrath, knowing how vindictive he is, and he would try to take out this anger on someone. Get out. The man simply shouted with all his anger at that moment while the sailor quickly left. The man looked for a moment before grabbing his wine glass on the desk and simply throwing it at the wall, shattering it the next moment. He couldn't measure his fury at that moment. I need to talk to Littlefinger. That bastard assured me it was a good venture, and I hope he keeps his word. I want my ships back, he exclaimed alone while the guards listened outside, remaining silent, not wanting to make their lord even more furious with them. I will write to him now, the man said as he sat at his desk, taking a parchment with quill and ink, and began writing what happened in the letter with his dissatisfaction, asking Littlefinger to resolve his problems quickly. After all, having 12 fewer ships under his command would significantly reduce his profits in the coming weeks, preventing him from buying goods from Essos to resell here, while also taking items from here to sell in the desert lands across the ocean. He finished writing 2 types of letters as he had planned, with each line not leaving anything out, and finally completed them. "Guards!" Gerald Grafton exclaimed as one of the guards entered his solar and looked at his lord, who was far from calm. "Take this to the Maester and send it to the Master of Coin in King's Landing immediately," he demanded, and the man swallowed hard as he walked past the shards of glass and took the paper before leaving the place and heading to the part of the castle where the Maester was. After seeing the situation, the Maester nodded but did not miss the chance to look at the content. So they attacked Lord Gerald Grafton's ships. "I will inform the Citadel about this," he said, not caring if his lord and the Master of Coin were planning to place evidence against the Arctic ships. After all, this was good for them. He simply placed it on the Raven to King's Landing, and it departed. After seeing the Raven depart, the Maester wrote a new letter and sent it to the Citadel immediately. The Raven that went south traveled for a few days before arriving in King's Landing and landing in one of Littlefinger's brothels. A prostitute picked it up and saw the letters addressed to her master with the seal of Gulltown. What interesting news! Littlefinger, who was in bed with a red-haired woman, was called by this prostitute and took the 2 letters. He opened them and began reading, but at the same time, he frowned at Gerald Grafton's demands in the first letter. He smiled that things had turned out better than he imagined with the second letter that the Lord of Gulltown wrote. He turned his gaze to the prostitute who was with him at that moment. "It seems I have to go. I have something important to do," he said, and put on some clothes before leaving and heading towards the Red Keep. Going to the castle, he headed to the Tower of the Hand while Jon Arryn was writing something in his book when a guard of House Arryn opened the door. I told you not to let anyone interrupt me. Jon Arryn growled immediately. Sorry, Lord Hand, but the Master of Coin is here to see you, and it seems important, he said, and Jon looked at him for a moment before sighing. Lord Baelish, what does he want now? Anyway, let him in, Jon requested, and Baelish entered shortly after with a face feigning concern. Lord Hand, he said, greeting the older man and maintaining the same concerned expression. Speak, Lord Baelish, what brings you here? Did something happen? Jon noticed Baelish without his usual smile. Yes, I would like you to read this letter, the man said, taking the piece of paper and beginning to read it. The man remained silent while he had the paper in front of him, his eyes beginning to tremble slightly. This is terrible. It's an attack against Westeros. Jon, who was already not very favorable to the Arctic people trading in Westeros, found a good excuse to turn the crown against this group coming from the wild north, especially when his kingdom was harmed by such a fleet. You see, Lord Hand, we have a threat sailing against our waters, Baelish said, appearing shaken but keeping a smile behind his mask, quite pleased with the course of events. Let's go. We must convene a meeting quickly, Jon exclaimed immediately as he began walking, leaving his tasks aside and starting to descend the tower, encountering Ser Jaime and Ser Meryn following the prince training in the garden. The crown prince, Joffrey Baratheon, was anything but a warrior, even at 13 years old, which left King Robert quite disappointed with the man who would succeed him later. He still didn't know how to properly wield a sword, but Jon Arryn didn't care about that now. He turned back to one of the guards managing the prince's training in the yard. Ser Jaime, Jon called as Jaime turned his attention to the hand of the king. Lord Hand, he looked. I want you to find someone to summon the entire council now. We have an urgent meeting, he said while Baelish simply followed him from behind. An urgent meeting? Are we at war or something? Jaime asked with a small smile, mocking the urgency. No, Ser Jaime, not yet, because soon we might be. The Arctic fleet attacked a group of merchant ships in our waters and raided them. They were Gulltown ships. Jon Arryn spoke firmly as Jaime raised an eyebrow, but nodded after a while, leaving his nephew's training to his fellow Kingsguard. Ser Jaime, Jon called one last time, making the man turn to him. Call even his majesty. Say it's urgent and we might go to war. Jon warned, and Jaime nodded once more before leaving. Jaime went to speak with his sister while sending many messengers to find all the council members. Meanwhile, Cersei was quite frustrated lately. Ravens had been pooping on her head whenever she left her room, as if she were being punished by the Seven or something. She lost count of how many times she had to return to her chamber after having her hair ruined by bird droppings. She even ordered the guards to use crossbows to eliminate any bird in the castle. She began walking the corridors of the Red Keep with 4 guards, all armed with crossbows, to shoot any bird they saw. This reduced the number of incidents, but some still managed to hit her occasionally, forcing her to skip parties and banquets at the castle because of this situation. It wasn't just this strange event, where the servants were already whispering that she had angered some gods, but also the fact that she was no longer receiving responses to her requests. She had instructed Ser Boros to send a message for an attack by some mercenaries at the port, but countless days had passed with no news. Even Ser Boros had left with Prince Renly to the Reach on a trade mission, making it seem like her plan to attack and try to kidnap the family of the Arctic bastard had failed in the end. She was in her room when her brother entered, bringing news. Despite being surprised, Cersei smiled broadly, now having an excuse to attack the Arctic people. Let's go, Jaime. This meeting will be important, she said and began to get ready and leave with her brother. But as soon as she reached the door, she stopped. Guards, she exclaimed, and some guards in the corridor quickly approached with crossbows. Kill any bird you see, she commanded, and the men nodded while Jaime just sighed as his sister walked towards the council chamber, looking up as if expecting enemy attacks from anywhere at any moment. The council chamber soon filled with all its members, except Robert, but it didn't take long for the door to open with him entering, looking like a man with a hangover, even though it was the afternoon. I heard about going to war, he exclaimed as Ser Barristan Selmy followed closely behind. "We'll discuss this now, Your Majesty," Jon Arryn commented, waiting to start the meeting. "Then start this meeting. Who is the enemy? Who is challenging me? Is it the Targaryens?" he exclaimed, growling at the end, grabbing the wine bottle on the table and drinking straight from it without using a cup. "No, Your Majesty, it's the Arctic people," Jon Arryn said, and Robert stopped drinking at that exact moment, looking at him in surprise. "What do you mean by that, Jon?" he demanded. "Let me read this," Jon Arryn said as everyone except Renly watched him take the parchment and begin to read aloud. "I am writing to inform you that I was attacked on the high seas." He continued reading to the end of the parchment while the entire room fell silent. "No bodies? What the hell does that mean?" Jaime looked surprised at the information, his brow furrowed. "We don't know. Only that our Lord of Gulltown didn't find a single body in the water, which is very strange." Baelish shared his thoughts. "They're northern savages. I've heard there are many cannibals in those lands. Who would doubt that they would take the bodies to eat later?" Pycelle said, "Don't be so foolish, Maester. No one retrieves a body from the water to eat," Stannis commented, finding the disappearance of the bodies quite strange, though it seemed irrational to him. "What should we do, Your Majesty?" Varys asked, looking at King Robert with interest while the latter seemed thoughtful, no longer drinking his wine. His gaze left the king and looked upwards, searching for any raven. He had the paranoia I might be watching him as if it were someone, knowing all his secrets, which made Varys quite scared despite not showing it outwardly. His fear was how this meeting could be observed by Jon Arctic, and if he said something about it, he would be labeled as mad by everyone. "What choice do we have? We must attack them and declare them enemies," Cersei said. "Despite seeming like a direct attack, I believe we should have some explanation for this." Ser Barristan commented from behind the king, while Ser Jaime remained silent behind his sister. "Robert, I know you have a friendship with Ned, and that this Jon Arctic is his son, but you need to do something about it. He's with your brother right now in the Reach. This is the time to act before he returns to the sea. After all, it's quite alarming when we don't know how they deal with ships, which leave no bodies, only burnt wreckage." Jon warned with a tone of seriousness, while Robert, with his rare, serious look, nodded. "All right, Jon. I won't send an army, but I will send an armed group to summon Ned's son to the Red Keep, demanding an explanation for why his ships attacked Westerosi merchants. Also, ask my brother to speak with Ned's son about the summons," Robert said, and looked at each of the council members, stopping at Jaime. "Ser Jaime, I summon you for this task, along with a group to go to the Reach as well," he said at the end. "Wait, Robert." Cersei immediately protested, but Robert was nursing a strong hangover and didn't want to argue. "I don't want to hear anything from you, woman. Just shut up and let your brother fulfill the king's order." "I count on you, Kingslayer," he said with a tone both angry and serious. Jaime, despite trembling at the nickname that followed him like a curse, nodded to Robert. "As you wish, my king," he said. "Now I will return to my bed. I need to sleep," he said grumpily and began to leave while everyone stood up as protocol, allowing Robert to exit with Ser Barristan following closely behind. "I will prepare the men and depart immediately," Ser Jaime commented as he began to leave as well. Cersei tried to protest, but there was nothing more she could do. "I will send a letter to the Tyrells, demanding that they keep Jon Arctic in their castle until the Kingsguard arrives. Also, send a letter to Prince Renly with an extra message," Jon Arryn directed to Pycelle, who nodded and left the room like the other council members. Each had their own opinion about today's discussion and what to do about Arctic. Some felt fear, others joy and greed, hoping to gain much from this conflict. Meanwhile, a week had passed since the archery tournament, and the main event was about to begin while Jon was in his tent with his wife, receiving a parchment from a raven he had anticipated. "Another letter from those Maesters?" Serena asked beside Jon as he read it. "Yes, they have noticed that something is wrong. After all, they haven't received any letters from the Citadel as responses and don't know that all their letters never reached their destination." Jon commented with a small smile. "Did they include anything new this time?" She couldn't help but ask. The same as always, how they are surprised by Arya's level of intellect, even while living in a place they consider savage. How we are superior in military skills, since we have demonstrated many times how we could defeat anyone on any field, Jon said. Except in the joust, she remarked with a smile. Well, they'll find out about that soon enough, Jon replied and continued. It's amusing how they are eager to find weaknesses in my leadership and the faith of my men in me, even stating that they are visibly shaken by the control I have over all the Arcticans, including giants and dwarves, despite me being only 15 named days, Jon commented. Are they trying something against us at this moment? Serena asked suddenly with a more serious tone, but Jon shook his head. Despite the hostility in their gaze and disdain, they are not planning anything. At least the Citadel hasn't sent any orders, Jon said. Unlike in Dorne, these maesters in the castle seem to have only the mission of observing his every move and the characteristics of his group. Even so, it is very funny how they detail their shock after seeing the knowledge acquired through Arya and Arctic, even becoming greedy, wanting our methods of study. But that's something they can only dream of, Jon commented. What are you planning to do, Jon? You know they are plotting something against us. After all, they have been following us since Dorne. Serena commented with some concern now. Don't worry, I have a good plan. It's time for Westeros to know the true power of Arctic, and I am thinking of sacking our first city here. I know this will ruin our business, but that doesn't matter anymore, Jon said with a dangerous tone. Serena didn't know exactly what her husband was planning, but she just nodded, trusting his judgment. Well, my love, Jon said, kissing her forehead. Let's get up. After all, today we have a tournament with a joust to win, Jon said, as the bet with Prince Renly would be decided today, and Jon was ready to fight against the champion he had chosen and win some extra lands in Westeros. Are we ready? Jon looked at his group, who were prepared to head out again for the tournament. Seeing them nod, Jon led them straight to the tournament, which, unlike the last time, had its structure changed for the joust that would take place that day. The bleachers were much larger, so that all the nobles could have a good view, with exclusive podiums for the great families and Prince Renly. The commoners and bards had to contend with a much more horizontal view, left a crowd on the ground, while some climbed nearby trees if they weren't caught by the guards, due to the security for the nearby nobles. Jon, I want to see you knock everyone down from the start in all the matches, Arya exclaimed next to Jon. I can maybe do that, but I don't plan to make it that easy. After all, I want to give a bit of excitement to the audience, Jon said to his sister with a smile. Did you really bring that horse? She asked again. Yes, didn't you see? He raised an eyebrow. I didn't know. I was only told about it today, Arya admitted. Yes, I asked the fleet to bring him here. After all, I need one of him, and this is my most important horse of all, Jon said. That's pretty obvious. You wanted to participate with your wolf. Serena couldn't help but laugh at that. You know, I'd even try, but I know it wouldn't be possible. So this past week I made sure to prepare another mount. Jon spoke. They might even create a song about you again, Arya suggested with a mischievous smile. Seems like the Lady of the Bow wants a song about Jon. Serena asked Arya, while the others listening to that smiled. In the past week, not only did Eldrich have his own song, but the bards created a song about the 11-year-old girl winning 4th place, something that even surpassed Eldrich, as everyone wanted more of the song about Arya Stark. The song wasn't the only thing that changed this week. While Jon continued visiting the Tyrell's castle and even attending a few more banquets, Willis seemed to start courting Arya. They seemed to see an impressive pair with Arya, but the girl remained quite distant from them, maintaining only respect, but leaving no opening while staying oblivious to the courtship that wasn't limited to just the Tyrell heir. You know I'm famous among the Southerners. Arya spoke with some arrogance, smiling, happy to have a song earned by her own skills. Let our father hear that in the halls of Winterfell. Jon commented calmly. Bran will be jealous, she said immediately, and a silent atmosphere took over them the next moment. Jon and Arya couldn't help but think of their younger brother at that moment, hoping they could meet again someday, but Jon more than Arya, as he didn't seem to be very well accepted in the north, not without getting into a conflict in those lands due to some petty nobles. Putting that aside, Jon continued the path with the group, and they finally began to hear the commotion of the tournament as they approached it, with the Giants doing a good job of clearing the way through the crowd and entering the place, while Jon had an exclusive podium for his family. He continued to have a lot of contact with the Tyrell family, and this had improved their relations, despite Arya being discreetly courted by the family's heir. Jon and Willis had something in common, which was animals, and Jon negotiated many horses over the week with the nobles of the Reach along with the Tyrell family, hearing many recommendations from Willis. He could even see if an animal was good enough for him, but the problem was reaching those animals, and Willis served very well for that contact. Garland was his constant training partner in the yard. Despite not having as good a partnership as he had with Willis, they got along very well, training, and Jon even instructed Garland a few times after the latter had to admit that Jon was the strongest swordsman he had ever met in his life. Marjorie was a bit strange for Jon. She treated him with respect, but sometimes she looked at him so intently that he wondered if she wanted to take him to bed a few times. His wife knew better, but Jon didn't insist on this and ignored it, maintaining only respect for her status. He thought she was one of the most beautiful women, he had to admit, but he didn't like her personality much. He believed she was greedier than he would like one of his wives to be. Mace Tyrell was a very distant man. Although he was often very surprised by many things Jon did, they rarely addressed each other in their few meetings. Jon felt some disdain from him for Jon's status, but at the same time, he saw him as quite confused. His wife, Allery Tyrell, was a calmer person. She addressed Jon with respect, like her children, and liked and treated Serena very well. Always wanted to see the perfumes from the north and talk about many things. Olenna, on the other hand, was a more difficult woman to deal with in this place, always keeping a sarcastic tone, but, at the same time, always observing them like a hawk. Jon considered her a schemer. She hadn't talked to Jon alone yet, but that hadn't happened yet. Not that it changed the fact that she would do so after the tournament. Jon was just waiting for the invitation from the woman who ran the Tyrell family to have tea in her gardens alone. In Westeros, there was a silent game, a game of power called the Game of Thrones. Jon classified the players into two types. The schemers were the people moving the pieces behind the curtain to gain or maintain their power, and Olenna was one of them. He saw many of them also in the King's Council. Jon personally had no love for such people and would eliminate them if it wouldn't cause a major diplomatic problem. So he had to wait until a war arose where he could have that excuse. Besides the schemers, there were the pieces, whom the schemers moved almost like puppets. Marjorie was a piece of the Tyrell family. As an example, since with her becoming queen, which was the Tyrell's interest since her creation, she would place her blood in the royal lineage and increase the family status. After all, even the great houses had problems in their realms, and people of the lower rank were always waiting for their guard to drop to overthrow them and take their status. Jon could say that families like the Tarleys would take power from the Tyrells if they could in a moment of weakness. One way the Tyrells prevented this was by forming the Tyrell, Redwine, and Hightower Alliance. After all, they had important relatives concentrated in Highgarden, with Olenna herself coming from the Redwines and the mother of Willis, Garland, Marjorie, and Loras being a Hightower. But this alliance didn't seem enough for them. Olenna was too ambitious to keep power only in her realm. She wanted more, and even to take the power of the throne. Jon wouldn't doubt if she wanted to be like the Baratheons themselves, even changing the stag symbol in red keep to keep the flower symbol, and Olenna would certainly do everything in her power for that. Speaking of the Baratheons, Jon didn't have a bad experience with Renly. The man was often a bit stupid and annoying, always smiling, but he still treated Jon with respect. Even when talking nonsense, Jon still maintained patience and tolerated his exaggerations. Loras, who was his guard all the time, kept a certain distance from Jon. Despite hearing that he had once been an avid fan of the song and ballad, Little John, he seemed reserved and even disliked Jon's presence, almost as if he were jealous. Not that Jon could do anything about it, so he just ignored him the whole time. And the last man who stood out this week was Boros again. The idiot hadn't learned from his last mistake and tried to provoke them again. Jon lost his patience when he heard him call Serena a wild prostitute. He returned to the Maester shortly after, seemingly showing that when Tormund beat him, it was just a slap on the face compared to what Jon did to him. Since Jon attacked him without anyone being able to stop him afterward, he broke the man's jaw, fractured the bones on the right side of his face, and knocked out half of his teeth. His nose, already broken by Tormund, worsened even more, and he was in critical condition, in a coma with the risk of permanently losing vision in one eye. Of course, this shocked everyone. Jon had only used his fist to destroy the man in less than a minute, unleashing his true superhuman strength after years of taking his potions. He didn't even let the royal guards act and did it on his own, giving the only order that prevented anyone from approaching. This was not taken lightly, and before anyone could protest, Jon challenged anyone to contest his aggression. No one said anything after Renly had seen everything and sided with Jon. After all, he had asked Boros not to approach them anymore, and the man, being a royal guard or not, acted against his orders. In the end, Jon was seen as someone defending his wife's honor, and this matter ended up being favorable for Jon in the last few days. Some nobles even cheered for him in the end, and many ladies seemed to want Jon to ask for their favor in the joust, but that was out of negotiation. Returning to the present, Jon and his group were surprisingly applauded by other nobles as they entered the arena and headed to the place reserved for him. Besides the horses he wanted to buy, he negotiated his products through the Tyrells and ended up meeting many people. After all, they were a good way to gain information about the kingdom and Westeros, as Jon discovered the Tyrells' alliances and ambitions through these nobles, connecting all the dots. With his sister and wife sitting in the main seats with him on the covered podium, he greeted the other podiums and sat, waiting for the most anticipated tournament of all. The nobles tried to flaunt their wealth as much as they could to assert their status, and the ladies wore the best dresses and adorned themselves for an internal competition among the women. Even Arya seemed to compete in this, while she spent more time fixing her hair than usual and wore her best dress. Unlike the archery contest, where even commoners could enter by paying a fee, the joust was more elitist. Only knights could compete, with the vast majority being sons of nobles. There were exceptions, such as bastards, and even commoners who managed to become squires of some lesser knight by some luck, but it was quite rare. Of course, Jon was not a knight, but even so, he would participate in the tournament as one of the most important candidates. After all, he wagered his Valyrian steel sword with Prince Renly, who wagered lands in the Stormlands. The northern men settled again next to the podium while the giants kept everyone away, with the dwarfs making loud noises and drinking. Some northern members went to the podium and brought drinks and food for Jon and his most important members. Of course, he didn't drink, so he waited for the tournament to start, which didn't take long. It was early in the morning, and it would be a tournament that would last 2 days, with Jon participating only when called. His clothes and horses were already waiting for him in the place where the knights and their squires took care of the preparations. With that, the herald emerged in the middle of the field, the same one who narrated the archery competition, and presented himself to the audience, filling the place with his voice while everything fell silent to hear the man. Ladies and gentlemen, nobles and commoners, welcome to the grand jousting tournament in honor of my lord, Mace Tyrell's birthday. The herald's voice echoed through the arena, capturing everyone's attention. And with that, we will have the honor of witnessing the bravery and skill of the most fearless knights of Westeros, he exclaimed, glorifying the competition. The crowd applauded enthusiastically in the next moment, the commoners being the most excited about it, and the herald continued. We have a total of 128 knights competing in this tournament. They have been divided into pairs, and each pair will compete in a series of elimination just with judges marking points to decide the winner when neither falls. The more shields destroyed, the more points will be counted. He began announcing the rules. The herald paused to let the spectators absorb the information. The rules are simple. Each joust consists of 3 rounds today, where the knights would try to knock their opponent off their horse with their lances. Whoever knocks their opponent down will win and advance to the next round immediately. Those who do not knock their opponents to the ground will be judged by the points I mentioned earlier. He said, Jon, don't trust these judges. when all before the last round. Arya immediately requested, not trusting the Southerners, and Jon smiled at her. "I feel offended by this, Arya. Do you believe I will need judges?" Jon said, opening a smile. The herald looked around, ensuring everyone was paying attention. "The knights who win their battles will advance to the next rounds in this style. Out of the 128 knights, 64 will participate in the second round, and the winners will be placed in the last round of the day, with 32 champions," he said and continued. "After the last round ends, only 16 knights, champions, will be acclaimed tonight when the banquet is held for the nobility. As soon as the day starts tomorrow, which will be the second day when we will decide our true champion, they will compete among themselves. Out of the 16, only 8 will remain. From 8, 4 will go to the semifinals, and after they compete, we will have only 2 knights vying for the title of champion." As he finished explaining how the competition would proceed, the crowd was ecstatic, murmuring and commenting excitedly about the first battles and who would be the true winner of this tournament. Besides the honor and glory, we have an exciting contest between 2 people in this place. One of them is our glorious prince and the king's brother, Prince Renly Baratheon. On the other side, we have our special guest, king of a kingdom to the north of Westeros, King Jon Artica. He exclaimed, not letting the crowd of commoners clap yet, not knowing what the competition was about, or even reminding the nobles who had heard about it over a week ago. In this competition, we have a very valuable bet between the 2 monarchies. On one side, Prince Renly Baratheon will enter the competition with his champion, Loras Tyrell. He announced with people clapping immediately, as Loras was the favorite of many. On the other side, the King of the North himself will fight in person. If he is as skilled in riding as his archer is in shooting, we may see a great competition between the 2. He spoke as more applause arose with excitement, although Jon had fewer people cheering for him compared to Loras. Now you must be wondering what is so important about this bet, so let me tell you, he said in a clearer and more animated tone. Prince Renly made a bet with the Northern Monarch. If Prince Renly loses to Jon Artica, he will give large amounts of land in the Stormlands for Jon to use as a trading post. He spoke while everyone who didn't know this was immensely shocked, but not as much as what was to come. But if Prince Renly's champion, Loras, wins, Renly will gain the legendary Valyrian steel sword, Dark Sister, he announced, and everyone exclaimed even more. Westeros treated a Valyrian steel sword with more importance than lands in a kingdom across the continent. Renly stood up from his seat and waved to the crowd, which responded with enthusiastic applause. Jon did not stand up. He just nodded his head to everyone looking at him and clapping, as the competition had again reached a higher level for those unaware of the bet. Let all the knights prepare their lances and mounts. May courage, skill, and honor prevail in this grand jousting tournament. The herald concluded, leaving the center of the arena as the trumpets sounded again, signaling the start of the competitions. A group of servants approached the center with a large crate and placed it in the middle of the field. A judge approached the crowd. Now we will see the sequence of knights that our competitors will face. Please bring your squires so they can pick their numbers. Bring the name of your knight, and we will get the registration list. He spoke and waited for a group of young men to come forward to see the numbers of their knights. Can I get the number for you, my king? A royal knight asked beside Jon, but Jon shook his head. Don't worry too much about it. After all, they have already chosen my number and Loras. Jon already knew that they had placed the 2 names on opposite sides on their own, as they seemed to believe Jon had a good chance of reaching the finals and competing with Loras, which was a surprise to him, but he just smiled. What is your number then? Arya asked beside him. Loras has number 1, and I have 128. He answered, not caring much, as his confidence in this model was unshakable, especially with that horse. After a while, everyone had picked a number, and Jon had an opponent among them, who was number 127, but he didn't know who it was yet. As soon as the crate was removed from the middle of the place, and it was clean and empty again, the herald came out once more for everyone. Now we will begin today's joust. Our first competitor is none other than Prince Renly's champion, Ser Loras Tyrell," he exclaimed while the crowd filled with loud applause. His opponent is Ser Water from the south of the Reach. He announced, an unknown knight to Jon. While the applause was much weaker than for the first announcement, Loras left the podium and went to prepare the next moment. With these two competitors, we officially begin the tournament. The herald announced once more as he waited for the first two knights to prepare for the first joust. It didn't take long for the competitors to finally emerge from each side of the tournament. While Loras had already exchanged his noble clothes for a plate armor made by the best blacksmiths of Westeros, he entered, boasting with a firm posture as he rode out on his horse, displaying the Tyrell sigil on his chest and shield, appearing in front of the entire crowd that immediately cheered for him. The ladies seemed to go wild, as Loras was very gallant with good status, combined with not being betrothed yet, where single women saw a great opportunity. "Let's start the first round," the herald exclaimed again, while the judges also prepared to start and evaluate. "Jousting seems so boring compared to the horse racing games in Artika's arena," Arya murmured, not finding much fun in a game where people hit each other with lances. "Each kingdom has its own games and culture. Arya, you should know that," Cyrena said. "She will learn that over the next few years. After all, we will be traveling east," Jon said, revealing a bit of his plans. "To the east? Like Meereen?" she asked, surprised. "Farther east. I'm talking about the Jade Sea and E.T." Jon smiled. "Really, we're going to travel that far? You told me that few have achieved that feat, and one of them is Corlys Velaryon, known as the Sea Snake," she said excitedly. "I see you still remember my history lessons, but we'll talk about that later. First, let's pay attention to the tournament in front of us." Jon requested, and Arya complied, while the first joust was about to begin with the knights calmly walking through the stands. Loras stopped in front of the Tyrell stands and asked the favor of none other than his own sister. A smart move, as it would not give any opportunity to single ladies, which seemed that Loras did not like women very much. Besides, this would greatly enhance Marjorie's status as well. After receiving the favor, which Marjorie gave with pleasure and cheered for her brother, his opponent, Water, took the favor of another lady, and they began to prepare, each standing at one end. Jon watched as Loras and Water positioned themselves on their horses, each holding their first lances above their shoulders, ready for the first joust of the tournament. Both horses moved, uncomfortable with the situation, but still obeying their riders. The trumpets sounded, signaling the start of the joust. Loras finally lowered his visor, adjusted his position in the saddle, and held the lance firmly. Water did the same, his eyes focused on his opponent. "Let the first battle begin," the judge announced, and in the blink of an eye, both knights charged, their horses galloping with force and determination towards each other. They quickly ran towards each other as the sound echoed across the ground, meeting in the middle of the field. The sound of lances clashing against shields echoed through the arena. The crowd immediately screamed in excitement while the ladies sighed, with Loras losing a bit of balance in his saddle, seeming that Ser Wada had taken some advantage over him. Loras was slightly suspended, but in the next moment, he firmly remounted and reached the end, before meeting a squire, who handed him a new lance, as his had cracked. They took their lances and once again ran towards the center in unison. The advance continued until they clashed against each other once more. But this time, Loras not only avoided the previous situation, but managed to bypass Ser Water's shield, hitting his chest while his plate dented, and he was forced to move against the advance with the lance, unable to even land a hit on Loras. "Ser Wada has fallen," the herald shouted as the crowd exploded into applause and cheers of enthusiasm, celebrating Loras' victory. Loras demonstrated why he was Renly's champion. His lance hit Water with such force that he fell heavily to the ground and stayed there for a while until he started to leave the field. Loras still flaunted a bit to the crowd before starting to leave, meeting a squire. "The first fight is over. Now we'll be watching 62 more matches before seeing Jon," Cyrena commented. "Watch him and eat dirt all day, what more could I ask for?" Jon said with an ironic tone. "Why do you have to be the last? You can beat anyone there." Arya complained once again, not wanting to watch this all day. After all, she wasn't like those southern ladies who screamed desperately for attention from some knight. I think I might find someone very strong in my turn. Jon murmured with a slight smile. I highly doubt it, Arya said, and then the judge called. Number 3 and number 4, he exclaimed, and the knights, already knowing their numbers, began to leave the corners of the field while taking some favor from their lady, as the previous knights did, and began once again with the judge's shout. This joust lasted 4 rounds before number 4 knocked down the opposing knight. They even announced their names, but Jon was not very concerned about that. The fights continued as time began to pass shortly after. Jon still kept an eye on the matches, responding to some people who addressed him, while watching another knight fall to the ground. It didn't take long for another knight to fall to the ground in the next round. Arctic King, your boredom is visible from miles away. How about a bet like in the archery game? Renly decided to speak to Jon from the other podium. Another bet? What do you propose? Jon asked, a bit curious. What else? How about this? I bet that the Knight of Houseball will win this round. Renly challenged him with a smile, and Jon nodded. Very well, 500 gold dragons, and I believe he will not defeat Sere Flowers. This round will be a draw, Jon said. He didn't know the man's name, but he knew he had the bastard name. I wouldn't say that the opponent of the man I'm betting on seems pretty weak, Renly said, and many laughed at that. You are right, but there are other factors that may interfere with my judgment, Jon commented. He could see that the bastard knight was quite deficient in his skills, but Jon could see that his horse was better than the opponent's and compensated for that. It's not like Jon had a 100% chance of getting this right, but it was a bet, so he believed in the things that had the highest chance of happening. Both knights crossed each other, striking one another, with neither of them falling. Jon turned back to Renly, who did not seem affected by losing. It seems I've won, Prince of Westeros, Jon said. Yes, but I can still recover that by the end of the day, he said confidently. Jon could hear more challenges coming from the prince as he kept nodding, enjoying the tournament better while winning most of the time. Besides seeing the knight's skills, he could see the condition of the animal they were riding, but he still couldn't get them all right, as there were still many factors he had no control over. The hours continued to pass with Jon eating things his men brought. The Articans seemed bored watching unknown knights, with the dwarves complaining, in contrast with the rest of the common folk, who seemed even more excited about this game than the archery championship. The fights continued until all the games had passed, and finally, it was Jon's turn with someone he still didn't know. This game is before me. It's time for me to prepare, Jon warned as he got up for the next game. Finally, we'll see a king enter a joust. I hope to see a great spectacle, Renly announced while everyone looked at Jon. Good luck, Jon, Serena said. Go on, Jon, Arya cheered as he left with the guard and went to the area where the horses were taken care of, where some Articans were taking care of his animal as he approached. Hello, Panis, Jon said calmly while some people nearby, especially other squires taking care of their animals, looked at him. Jon touched the horse. Panis neighed. This animal had been with him for years. It was his first horse, the same one that saved him at the Ice Hill farm. The one that kicked the bandit Jon was about to die from when he was only 8 name days old and had accompanied him since then to Artica. Jon had considered him his main horse ever since. My king, your armor is ready. The soldier came with the Elden metal armor. That's good. Help me put it on, Jon requested. Exclamation point. The horse made another sound, but Jon smiled. Sorry, my friend, we can't put armor on you. It's against the rules of this competition, but we will still win them all, Jon said, and began to put on the armor quickly with his men. When he was finished, with Panis now having a proper saddle, he mounted him, touching him calmly. Let's go, buddy. Let's prepare for the fight, Jon said, waiting for the last round of the current match until one of them fell. Jon's horse seemed quite excited, pawing the ground with one of its front hooves. The fight seems to be over. Jon heard the herald shout a winner while he waited a bit longer. Now we have our 2 final candidates in this first elimination round, and it's none other than the king of Artica himself, who bet against Prince Renly to win his lands or lose his sword. Now let's see a bit of the man who entered such a grand bet, Jon Artica. He shouted as some men asked Jon to enter. Not that he didn't already know this was the moment, but he then entered the field galloping while the crowd appeared in front of him. What a beautiful armor. So that's the king of Artica. He certainly knows how to dress like one. People were immediately surprised by Jon's armor as he walked calmly through the place, his armor shining and reflecting the sunlight, a reflection that represented Artica and its king. His figure was even more mesmerizing than anyone who had ever entered here. His metal plates with Elden metal were white and blue, like the Artican flag, displaying his master blacksmith work, which he had forged himself. An idea came to everyone. After all, whoever knocked Jon off his horse could win the armor or demand a ransom as a tournament rule. No one thought he would use such an expensive item here, but many knights were eyeing it with greed. He continued walking through the field while the exclamations stopped just to look at him with admiration. He passed by the main podiums and went to the sky. "My lady, may I have the honor of using your favor in this fight?" Jon teased Serena, who patiently walked to the edge of the place. And when Jon pointed his lance at her, she placed a small garland of Artican flowers. "Win this fight for me, my knight." She decided to join in the game. He just nodded and continued to walk with her favor, but looked confused at the judge, who had not yet announced his opponent, until a servant ran to him and whispered something. Jon didn't notice how Lord Tarly, in one of the stands, was frowning at this. Jon went to the edge of the place where he had come from and waited, with only him in the field and people starting to murmur why his opponent had not yet participated. "Has the Arctic King already scared his opponent?" Renly commented, looking at the Articans. "Probably," they mocked. Then the judge, after hearing from the servant who had spoken earlier, announced again. "Now, the opponent of this man, the Knight of the Cartwheel," he announced, leaving everyone stunned as a man mounted on a horse that could barely bear his weight approached. This unknown knight was a bit too fat. While people who were stunned by his name soon saw a funny scene and in the next moment began to burst into laughter. "What is this? Where did this guy come from? Someone get him off the horse. Poor animal. Look, now I get the name. This was supposed to be an event between knights. Who called the jester?" Exclamations from nobles and commoners alike were soon heard all over the place, while Lord Tarly's face grew darker in one of the stands. 1,000 gold coins that Jon Artica will knock him down in the first round. Renly shouted, but no one seemed to bet against it, as it was evident that the chances of winning the bet were very low. The knight in question seemed to shrug while everyone laughed at him, wondering what he was doing there. But Jon looked at it with a raised eyebrow. "Samwell, what is he doing here?" Jon murmured softly, seeing the fat man and recognizing him. It was evident that he didn't want to be there. Maybe his father forced him. He even left out the family name to avoid humiliation. Jon thought, but still didn't understand why he chose that name. But Sam hadn't chosen that name. After all, he had stuttered his name, and the servant who heard it mocked him and made up a name before going to the judge. Samwell looked terrified, and when he saw Jon on the other side, his fear increased even more, knowing he was facing a king. It was evident he would lose, but he was there, because his father forced him, and he would at least have to run towards the knight, expecting to fall and get out of there, probably with a big sermon from his father later, saying he was a disgrace, and it would have been better if someone like him had never been born a Tarly. "Begin!" the judge shouted, but Jon didn't move, while Samwell still looked without knowing what to do. Jon looked at him and didn't know what to say. The boy was scared, and Jon liked him. At least he was one of the few sincere people here who didn't try to gain favor through friendship. Knowing his story, he could even put himself in his place. "Let's help him a bit then," Jon murmured internally and prepared with his lance pointed forward. "Come on, start it. Make the fat one start." People shouted impatiently as they saw Samwell, trembling with fear in his saddle, not knowing who he was with his visor down, as his father had ensured he wouldn't be recognized. What no one expected was that in the next moment, the Cartwheel Knight's horse looked at Jon, and its eyes seemed to change after blinking once. It simply exploded the ground below it with its hooves, advancing at full speed towards Jon, who did the same. "Ah!" Samwell was terrified, holding his shield on one side and his lance on the other, almost jumping off the horse as he couldn't keep steady. Even his shield was poorly positioned while his lance was still pointed upwards, trying to stop the horse, but it was impossible for him. "Stop, stop, stop," Samwell shouted, looking clumsy in the saddle, eliciting numerous laughs from the audience. His eyes widened when he saw Jon charging at full speed with his horse, pointing his lance at Samwell in a hostile manner, striking his shield as soon as he hit him. Jon did this on purpose, and although Samwell nearly lost his balance, he quickly regained his composure as his horse calmed down. Jon continued forward until reaching the other side to grab another giant white lance. Samwell was dazed, not believing he had survived the first round, watching Jon prepare again on the other side. "He really knows how to ride," Renly commented, a bit surprised by Jon's skills, but then came a disappointment. But he couldn't knock this man down in the first round. Could the Arctic King have overestimated himself? He commented, "Of course, he could never beat me, and I'll still take his armor," Loras said beside him, while Olenna looked at her grandson, shaking her head. "He knows how to use the lance. But who is the other fat knight? I don't remember another knight in this condition," Garland commented. "I don't know, but you know many knights appear in these tournaments with unknown names. Some aren't even knights," Willis commented, but his gaze fell on Jon on the other side. "That horse. I've never seen anything like it," he commented with admiration. "Jon didn't win the first time," Arya said grumpily. "You're too impatient. Wait and enjoy Jon's show," Serena said, recognizing that Jon had used his ward abilities on the opponent's horse. Suddenly, once again, the Cartwheel Knight's horse exploded without warning while Samwell tried to stay on it. Jon did the same, and Samwell couldn't point the lance, even dropping it, unable to hold on with the horse in that state. Jon once again struck his shield purposely in a way that didn't injure or knock the fat man down. The audience sighed and were surprised that despite being fat, the man managed to ride his horse well, even if he wasn't directly controlling it, and almost fell several times. This continued for a while, as Samwell grabbed another lance, and they jousted. In the 7th round, while his horse continued advancing without his control, he pointed his lance at Jon, who used his shield to defend easily. They continued like this until the last matches, and Jon didn't even need to knock him down, as he won by points. "Victory, King of Artica!" the herald shouted, and although people clapped, there was no longer the enthusiasm from before. Even with Jon looking more splendid than any other knight, he spent 9 entire rounds just breaking shields while the man only tried to stay on the horse. It was disappointing to say the least for them, but Jon didn't care, as he had no obligation to please them. "Thank you," Samwell said softly. His father didn't seem as disappointed as he had imagined in his seat with his family. "It was a good fight to start with. Thank you, Samwell," Jon said and withdrew, with Samwell looking at him, stunned, as Jon had recognized him. As Jon returned, he felt his horse move restlessly while making an unsatisfied sound. "You know, we didn't have a spectacular victory," Jon scolded, while the animal, as always, seemed very intelligent. Jon returned to his men, and they took care of Panis. Jon returned to his podium still in armor and waited for his turn, which would be halfway through the initial candidates, with 32 matches. The fights continued again with Loras and another man who had defeated his previous opponent, while Arya seemed to complain about Jon, but he didn't care and waited for his turn until it finally came again. Jon donned his armor and left with Panis, going to Serena and taking her favor again for luck. As he walked, the knight passed by him and approached. "You know that if I win, I have the right to take that armor, right? And I won't accept your ransom gold, bastard," the man said, and Jon looked at him with a dangerous expression while his horse unbalanced him a bit, afraid of Jon. Jon said nothing as he went to his spot to wait for the signal. As soon as they were ready, the judge shouted, "Are we going to have to wait another 9 rounds?" A noble shouted while others laughed, with Arya angry in her seat while Serena tried to calm her and watched Jon approaching the opponent in the center. If anyone expected 9 rounds, they were wrong, because Jon wasted no time. He struck the man, breaking his shield with his superhuman strength and throwing him backward with his armor crushed without mercy. No round so far had anyone knocking down the opponent like that. filling the place with excitement in the next moment as the man fell, screaming and beginning to moan in pain as Jon crushed him so much in his armor that he dented and broke some ribs. "Take this man's armor later. There will be no negotiation, and I intend to make a scarecrow out of it in front of our camp," Jon said to his men there, who nodded, watching the man being carried on a wooden stretcher to a medic. "Well, that was surprising. Take this," Renly said, tossing a bag of gold dragons to the side. A small hand grabbed those coins, with Arya smiling with that acquired gold. "Thank you, Prince Renly. It's always a pleasure to win against you," Arya said with a mischievous smile while betting on Jon. The tournament continued to another phase with 16 matches and 32 nights. It was already late in the afternoon when Jon was called once again to compete in the last match of the day. He appeared again with his Elden metal armor, facing an unknown knight, but he was very polite and respectful. Jon continued this joust until the 5th lance, knocking him down in the end, carefully not to hurt him severely with the fall. After all, these just were quite dangerous. Besides Jon breaking a man's arm and several ribs, many other men had broken limbs, and one even died in a match with a lance piercing his neck through an opening in his armor. Finally, we conclude this glorious day, but tomorrow we will have the final, with Jon Artica and Renly Baratheon continuing their bets without anyone losing today. "Who will win tomorrow?" the herald announced, gaining the crowd's anticipation as people, both commoners and nobles, commented. Despite Jon knocking a man down with one blow and injuring him severely, they still didn't see him as a favorite. After all, he took 9 rounds in one fight and 5 in another, giving the impression that he was lucky and his skills were mediocre. Jon joined his group, and they began to leave shortly after, heading to the camp and then to the banquet that night. The party was routine, while everything seemed ordinary, with people preparing for the next day when the man who would win the tournament would finally be declared. Jon was not the favorite among the people of Westeros, at least not by the majority, believing that his 2 fights with many rounds had given the idea that he was not very skilled. "Remember to bet a lot of money tomorrow. After all, 20,000 gold coins is such a small amount," Jon said to one of his ministers, hoping to enrich himself a bit more with that. Not that he needed the money, but he wanted to have the taste of making these nobles lose money. "Yes, my king. I will ensure to have the best profit tomorrow," the minister said, while Jon looked at the nobles dancing and chatting, many of those knights who would fight tomorrow while they boasted about the possible outcomes they would make. "It seems Eldrich has found love among the Southerners," Serena said, catching Jon's attention as he watched his archer dancing with the same lady. "I will not forbid her from entering Artica, as long as she stays there until we open our borders," Jon said. After all, if Eldrich liked to marry a Southerner, it wouldn't be a problem for him. The banquet started with exclamations from Renly Baratheon, saying he was excited for tomorrow and reminding of the bet he had made with Jon. After that, Jon returned to his camp. "Jon, what do you plan to do with the troops coming here?" Serena asked Jon. After all, he had already talked to her about what happened in Kingsport. "I will be intercepting all the ravens arriving at the castles in the next few days. I will finalize our negotiations, and we will be leaving, but not as cowards. It seems that these people will have to know the consequences of facing us," Jon said, already with a plan in his mind. "Are you going to raid that city?" she asked. "Yes. Lord Hightower is asking too much for me to visit Old Town, much more than he should. Obviously, he is planning something with those maesters. But since they wanted to go there, I will do it. We need books, and there's an almost inexhaustible amount at that place," Jon commented. "I will go with you," she simply said as he looked at her with a serious glint. "No," he said dryly. "I won't let you get into that midst of treacherous people. I am a giant. I can be quite useful," she said. "You carry the best of both of us in your belly. I won't let you get into this. I would never forgive myself if something happened to you and the baby. You will stay with the fleet, understand?" he said with a tone indicating that he did not plan to have room for discussion. Serena looked at him. Despite the gleam of reluctance in her blue eyes, she eventually nodded. "All right, but just come back alive to me and our baby," she said, and he nodded as she went to his lips. "Can you take care of me tonight, then?" she said as she took off her dress, and Jon ended up taking her as his wife like every night. The next day was a routine one. While they spent some time there organizing things before heading to the tournament, while Jon was already going with Panis mounted, arriving at the place while he prepared for the Jousts. As always, he was the last. Loras won on the third attempt as the opponent's shield could not withstand the blow and was destroyed, hitting the knight before knocking him down. In the first match, after that, the other knights continued fighting one against the other. Everything continued until the last ones were called, with Jon leaving the Artican podium a bit earlier and entering with Panis again. When called, Jon was at the sound of the trumpets and the excited screams of the crowd. Today's opponent was a notable noble, Sir Garland Tyrell himself, the champion of melee. As a knight, he could not help but participate in the jousting tournament, possibly even beating his younger brother. He walked up to the Tyrell's podium and took the favor of his fiancée. He finished and looked at Jon from across with a slight nod of the head as they prepared by positioning themselves on opposite ends of the field. Jon adjusted his visor, his armor of Elden metal shimmering under the sun once more. At the signal from the judge, both charged at each other, the hooves of Panis echoing powerfully against the ground. The lances met with a crash, wood against metal, sparks flying as the forces collided. Garland, surprisingly agile, managed a solid strike on Jon's shield, but the force of the impact was insufficient to destabilize the king of Artica. Jon, in turn, aimed at Garland's shield, his blow precise and strong enough to create a visible crack in the wood. Turning their horses, the two men prepared for a second pass. The crowd watched, shouting and clapping, seeing that the two seemed to have an exciting and balanced contest. "I bet 50,000 gold coins on my king." Suddenly from the podium, Jon's Minister of Trade exclaimed, hoping someone would join his bet too. The Tyrell family looked surprised by this, while they remained silent about it. But Mace, trusting that his son would win, agreed to it before anyone could react, especially his mother, before he did something foolish. "I bet 100,000 gold coins," he exclaimed without having the courage to see Olenna's furious look with that, while all the nobles around were surprised by this. "That's great. I bet then 100,000 gold coins." The minister smiled. "We're going to win 100,000 coins," Mace said confidently. "Father, wasn't that a bit too much?" Willis commented cautiously beside him. "Of course not. Don't you trust your brother? He will easily win this contest." Mace spoke confidently. "That fool will still bankrupt us before I even die this way," Olenna muttered, but low enough for only the family to hear. After all, she couldn't simply stop this now that her son had announced it loudly. It would show that the Tyrell family didn't keep their word, since reputation is even more important than 100,000 gold dragons. Meanwhile, another contest occurred as Jon and Garland once again clashed against each other, their lances exploding on the shields as they passed by each other. Jon's armor always had an advantage for being much lighter. Besides his superior strength, he found himself dealing with Garland easily, but he also did not want the fight to end too quickly. A third encounter happened as the audience exclaimed with them meeting once again, and a fourth happened, while they kept equal points in the contest, with the herald shouting about the contest and getting the audience more and more excited. In the fifth contest, something changed. This time, Jon took the initiative, adjusting his lance with greater precision. As they approached, he focused on the crack in Garland's shield, the tip of his lance finding exactly the weak spot. With a dull thud, Jon's lance burst through the shield, fragments of wood flying through the air. And Garland, caught by surprise by the force of the impact, struggled to maintain control of his horse. He leaned back, unbalanced, but with certain skill, managed to stay mounted. The audience exclaimed at this, while Mace frowned. "See, you fool. You didn't even notice that the Artican king didn't even have difficulty in this contest and was just holding back." Olenna spoke angrily to her son. "Once again we'll lose money to the Artican king, opening our coffers." Garland sighed and looked at Jon across as he prepared once again, while Jon maintained a firm stance on Panis. The judge asked them to start the sixth round, and a moment later, the horses ran, while the people were mesmerized for what would happen next as the ground shook. And at the exact moment, Jon pushed his lance with more force than he had used until then. The tip found its target. Garland saw this at the last moment, aiming for some opening of Jon. He quickly tried to move the shield, but Jon was faster as he hit him on top of his shoulder, with him finally dislodging from his mount and falling heavily to the ground. "Victory is for Jon Artica," the herald exclaimed while the crowd exploded in applause, surprise, and admiration for Jon Artica's victory over the melee champion, who was also one of the favorites. Jon circled the field calmly while Garland rose, aided by his squires. Despite the fall, the young Tyrell offered a smile acknowledging Jon's skill. Jon approached and dismounted from Panis, Garland raising his hand in a gesture of respect. "Seems I must ask. Can I ask for a ransom for my armor?" he said, maintaining a small smile behind his visor. "Of course, we can talk later, Sir Garland." Jon spoke and began to walk away shortly after. "Here is Lady Arya." Renly once again handed a bag of money to Arya, who smiled as she took it. It wasn't such an exorbitant amount as Mace Tyrell had bet, with him having to bow his head to his enraged mother at that moment. But still, Arya was enjoying earning money from Renly. The sequence of the tournament again in the quarterfinals began with Loras and a famous night, which ended up being a victory for the prince's champion after 4 rounds. Jon was not long in being called after that, as there were only 2 contests after Loras before he was called. He ended up facing a famous knight, who clearly wanted to win his armor, but was prevented with Jon knocking him down in the 3rd round, while the Artican minister continued betting on Jon with many nobles and earning even more money. Now, it was the semi-final, and the people who disbelieved in Jon began to see him with different eyes, leaving the audience even more excited about the final, as everyone now expected Jon with Loras. Loras achieved his victory against a knight who came with Renly, and Jon contested against a powerful knight of the Reach. But that did not prevent Jon from knocking him down in the 7th contest, breaking his shield and hitting his chest, with him falling back hard against the ground. "The Artican King is in the final," the herald shouted as everyone stood clapping seeing this happen. Jon nodded and returned to where his men waited to take care of Panis. As he dismounted, "Take care of him and have him ready until the match begins," Jon requested and returned to the podium. Despite it being the final, it would still take a while. After all, these people like to glorify things and wanted to make the last contest very interesting with some theatrical piece. It led to the herald talking about the 2 men and the contest even more extensively than at the start of the tournament, with Renly always smiling at it while Jon joined his wife, with Arya exclaiming everything that had happened while he was away and the money she had negotiated. "Now let's wait 30 minutes before starting this powerful contest," the herald shouted as Jon and Loras each stood on their podiums to eat some fruit and prepare for the contest. After 20 minutes had passed, Jon left the podium and Loras did the same. "Good luck, Jon." Serena wished this to her husband. "Go on, Jon. Finish him," Arya exclaimed. When the sun reached the middle of the sky, the herald made his call with pomp and circumstance. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are moments away from the grand final of this spectacular tournament. Gather to witness an epic duel between the Artican King, Jon, and the gallant Loras Tyrell." Loras then emerged from one side, with a rose in his mouth, displayed his impeccable and confident posture, attracting glances of admiration and single ladies, shouting for him to ask for their favor. But as always, he rode up to the Tyrell podium, where Marjorie was waiting with an embroidered handkerchief, the house symbol stamped on it. With a charming smile, he accepted her favor, carefully securing it to his armor. Jon, in turn, entered the battlefield with the sound of clapping, went up to Serena, who held a similar favor, a small piece of fabric adorned with the colors and the emblem of Artica. He took the fabric reverently and tied it to his arm, the couple exchanging an intense look of trust and love before Jon headed to his side of the tournament field. Jon and Loras positioned themselves. They adjusted their armors and visors, preparing for the contest that would decide the champion. The trumpets sounded, and an anxious silence fell over the crowd. The herald then shouted, "Release the horses," and in response, Both horses' hooves resonated across the field like thunder in the next moment. Jon and Loras charged towards each other. Their lances pointed with precision, and the initial clash was thunderous, the weapons and armors clashing forcefully, yet neither of the two yielded. They passed each other, turned, and prepared for another charge, picking up new lances from men waiting at the end of the field. "Get him, my king," a royal guard spoke as he handed over the new lance. The audience had clapped as soon as both clashed, but fell silent a moment later, waiting for them to exchange another blow to see if someone would be knocked down. But the contest continued balanced, with them once again clashing with their lances and shields, colliding and shattering. The audience screamed louder than ever as they went into the third round, the contest becoming even more intense. 20,000 gold coins? How about that? Arya exclaimed to Prince Renly, who looked at her for a moment, seeing a chance to recover everything he had lost that day to the young girl. "All right, Lady Arya, 20,000 gold coins," he spoke with a smile, while people around admired such a high bet. "As far as I know, your father wouldn't be proud of his daughter betting like this." Serena commented to Arya, since Lord Stark was not a man who liked bets and would certainly disapprove of his youngest daughter acting this way. "I'm making a lot of money. That's what matters. Didn't Jon bring me here to learn about trade?" she exclaimed, while Serena sighed at the somewhat rebellious behavior of her sister-in-law. 100,000 gold coins on my king. Anyone wants to challenge?" A voice emerged beside them, with Jon's minister exclaiming, "I bet." Once again, Mace, with the unbeatable illusion in his sons, shouted to the challenge, while his mother looked at him with a glare that could kill him by the end of the day. In the third encounter, they galloped towards the center once again. Jon adjusted his lance, aiming at a specific point on Loras's armor. At the last moment, with skill, Jon slightly deviated the lance, catching Loras off guard and hitting the shield with an impact that resonated across the field, while he tried to remain firm in his saddle, leaving everyone who bet on him with their hearts skipping nervously at that moment. Although he seemed almost falling, he continued holding firm, regaining his position. The fourth round was a clash, but after the third round, everyone saw that Jon did not seem shaken even once, which made the crowd start to believe that he would win this, while Renly sweated cold and Arya had a mischievous smile. The fifth contest came, and once again, both exploded their lances and shields, having to exchange them as soon as they reached the end of the field. The sixth contest once again gave Jon a certain advantage, while Renly had some difficulty stabilizing and didn't even manage to hit Jon. If he doesn't knock down Jon or Tika, he's going to end up losing on points after these contests. Olenna said with a furrowed brow, "I think Loras is going to lose this one." Marjorie commented with some fear, despite having eyes of admiration for Jon, and her gaze returned to Serena on the other side, wanting to switch sides for a moment. After all, every woman would like to become the queen of beauty and love in this place. The seventh and eighth contest resulted in a technical tie, while both walked to the last round, with Jon ahead due to his points gained above Loras before. Loras was breathing irregularly as he looked to the other side, while the man atop that burnt yellow horse in Elden metal armor prepared for the last round. "I need to win this now, for Renly, for my family, and for my honor," he murmured, determined to win the battle. Jon picked up his new lance from an Artican man and calmly looked at his opponent across the field. "I've drawn this out long enough. It's time to end this," Jon said, while firmly positioning himself on his horse, adjusting to knock down his opponent once and for all. The entire audience was even more mesmerized, with no one able to breathe due to the contest that would finalize the great wager and move rivers of money among the nobles. After all, it was not only the great nobles who had bet. The herald seemed nervous as well, trying to stay neutral, despite favoring Loras, the lord of his house. He turned to the crowd and began to exclaim, "Ladies and gentlemen, nobles of Westeros and distant lands beyond, we have reached the climax of our grand tournament, the moment everyone has awaited with bated breath and burning hearts. Prepare to witness a legendary clash, a confrontation of titans that will be sung by bards for ages to come. On one side, we have the indomitable Artican king, Jon, whose prowess and strength have reverberated through the Joust like the roar of an ancient northern wolf. And on the other, the eternally gallant, the champion of many hearts and tournaments, Ser Loras Tyrell, the very essence of chivalry and grace in Westeros. Both supreme warriors, both undisputed champions, now face off on our sacred field in the battle where everything will be decided. May the Seven guide us in this battle. May the ancient winds whisper their names. Now to the sound of trumpets, the beating of drums, and the call of destiny. Let the final contest begin. The horses are ready, the shields raised, the lances sharpened. May the best win and glory crown them, he exclaimed, and everyone waited in the same state. Jon and Loras prepared themselves, their gazes fixed on each other, as sharp as a Valyrian steel sword. The flags on their lances fluttered in the wind, each representing their house and kingdom. Then the judge finally gave the signal. The horses burst forth. Panis was faster than ever, and everyone was surprised to see him reaching Loras much quicker than the horse he was riding. As the distance between them lessened, the tension rose. Both knights adjusted their lances, pointing them precisely. At the last second, Jon tilted his lance slightly downward, aiming at a vulnerable point in Loras's armor that he had noticed in previous rounds. Loras saw this and tried to adjust his shield while maintaining his lance aimed at a more vulnerable point he believed Jon had, and a moment later, the impact resonated like thunder through the arena. Loras, caught off guard while hitting Jon's shield but not penetrating it, felt the same with his, but the difference was that his shield had been broken at that moment, while the lance continued its path towards him with the force of Jon, plus the speed of Panis being greater than Loras. The audience held their breath as Loras simply left his saddle, struggling as the lance continued pushing him backward. But physics was relentless. With a muffled scream drowned out by the crowd, Loras was thrown to the ground, falling heavily. The silence was broken for an instant, before being replaced by an explosion of acclaims and cheers. Jon pulled the reins, stopping Panis, who snorted and shook his head, equally stirred by the adrenaline of the encounter. Dismounting, Jon walked over to where Loras lay. Extending a hand, he helped the fallen knight to stand. Loras, regaining his breath and despite the fury he felt for losing, accepted the help and stood up. The herald, recovering from the initial shock, proclaimed with a loud and clear voice, "The winner of the tournament by merit and bravery, the Arctic King, Jon." The words echoed through the place as the official victor. The crowd around the field buzzed with the emotions of Jon's victory. But not everyone was happy. As in the noble stands, a group of lords and ladies conversed with varied expressions of triumph and disgust. I knew from the start that the Arctic King would come out on top. He was holding back the previous day, exclaimed a younger noble, clearly pleased, while counting a handful of gold coins. Beside him, a lady with a fan, trying to hide her frustration. "And to think I bet almost everything on Loras. Oh, how could I have been so foolish?" she murmured. A group of nobles had a somber appearance, murmuring among themselves. "This tournament has ruined me. I bet on Tyrell. Now, how am I going to explain this to my father?" At the main podiums, young Stark was visibly euphoric with Jon's victory. She clapped tirelessly along with the audience and couldn't contain a victory scream. "I knew it. I knew Jon would win," Arya exclaimed, turning to Serena and the others around her with a triumphant smile. "Did you see that? He was incredible." Arya then looked at Renly with a somewhat challenging smile. "So, Prince Renly, it looks like I've won another 20,000 gold coins, haven't I?" Renly, despite having lost a significant amount of money, maintained his composure for Arya, though somewhat forced. "It will be yours as soon as you ask one of my men to take it to your camp," he said, but his face soon darkened as he remembered that he would owe vast amounts of land to Artica at this moment. "It seems the Arctic King is a man full of surprises," he said in the end, unable to hide his furrowed brow, while Arya didn't care about that, just happy about the money won betting on Jon. Meanwhile, the matriarch Tyrell was visibly displeased. She sighed heavily, worried about the financial repercussions and the blow to her reputation from the defeat, Even though not paying what she bet would be seen as worse, still, it was a significant money loss at this tournament. Of all the foolish things you've ever done in life, Mace, this was the most reckless, Olenna murmured to her son, her voice low but laden with disapproval and fury. You've not only gambled away our coins, but our luck with them. She might have told him to learn something from this, but the fool seemed a complete idiot, only hoping that Willis would know how to guide their house after him. Mace was clearly shaken, his expression switching between a fake smile for other nobles and a scowl when he turned his attention back to his mother. "Mother, I'm sorry. I thought my children would win," he said quietly. As Loras left the field frustrated, Jon returned to Panis and mounted again, heading towards the judge who was waiting with a crown of flowers in hand. After all, he still had to award it to someone. It surprised no one when he began walking towards the Artican podium, and everyone expected him to give his crown of beauty and love to the woman he gazed at with such eyes. However, as soon as he approached and kissed his wife, he turned back to the audience. "My wife, Serena Artica, will always be my queen of beauty and love, but today I intend to name someone different. Why not my sister, who deserves something like this?" Jon exclaimed while placing the crown on the head of his stunned sister. "This is your punishment for betting there. Our father would not approve of something like this." Jon spoke softly while Arya finally looked at him, stunned. "But you—" She didn't have time to finish as the explosive sound of applause echoed through the venue, with Arya being declared the most beautiful woman by the tournament champion. Serena didn't mind at all and clapped for the girl. Arya was lost, not liking the attention at all, as she didn't enjoy being the center of attention for ladylike matters, but rather for her military skills. The tournament might have ended, but the celebrations continued throughout the following days, especially among the common folk, who kept talking about the event. Here, Jon Artica triumphed gloriously over Prince Renly Baratheon's champion, Loras Tyrell. Ballads of Jon's victory over Loras echoed throughout the city, with Jon hailed as the hero of the tournament. It also highlighted the bet between them involving a Valyrian steel sword and lands that would make many nobles envious. Jon was acclaimed as the foreign king who had won vast lands from the Prince of Westeros. There were some rumors claiming that Jon had won because he was a sorcerer who controlled animals, but these were not very compelling. While most believed that it was all nonsense, no one believed in magic without concrete evidence. Jon was well aware of this, as, besides some of his men walking around the city, his birds were also frequently seen there as they continued with the festivities. Even the ballad about Little Joe was heard. The bards were surely hoping that Jon would magically appear and hand out 1,000 gold coins, as he did with the bard from the archery tournament. And speaking of which, Jon was eating while he went back to one of his men to talk about this man. "How is our prisoner?" Jon asked his royal guard. "He knows he's trapped, but he seems quite devoted to his lord," the royal guard replied as Jon nodded. "I figured Doria wouldn't send just anyone," said Jon. "And did they catch the others?" "I haven't asked about that for days." "Yes, my king, as you instructed. We followed them for a few days and caught the birds in their hideout along with the letters. They are stored away until you ask for them," reported one of his men. Jon felt this and gave a small smile while looking at his wife. "Can you stay here a bit with Arya? I'll go sort this out," he requested and headed towards the aviary. He wanted more eyes in King's Landing, so using these directly contacted birds was the best thing. After finalizing his control over the birds, he released them into the sky as they headed east. "What should we do with the children, my king?" the royal guard asked, after watching the birds disappear into the sky. "We'll keep them until we leave, then release them. There's no use for us to hold spies, and they are children." "I refused to do this when they were just spying on us," said Jon, since they didn't have any information about them. It was just a silly game that was easily caught by the wards in the camp. Jon continued in the camp and spent some time with his wife until Garland came to meet him, and he nodded, mounting his wolf and heading back to the castle, since he had to finish his negotiations. Upon arriving, as usual, he was greeted by the usual members, with Willis leading him to the castle, while his wife and Arya were accompanied by Marjorie and her ladies-in-waiting. Jon went to a room to organize negotiations with several nobles from the Reach. He had been doing this over the past few days and had increased the demand even more after the tournament ended, buying a horse here, there, setting prices for his products, as he had to maintain his trade policies. In the end, Jon finally finalized all his negotiations, doing the same with his products as he did with Dorne. Despite some problems during his visit in the Reach, it was not bad. On the contrary, there was no fool like Oberyn and his daughters. In the end, he had made so much money that, basically, it was a bonus since in total they had taken more than 500,000 gold coins. The Tyrell family was in serious trouble with their treasury because of this, since just the tournament cost 200,000 and they lost even more in the bet. Willis did not seem very happy about it, but what could they do? His grandmother had said, after all, to give him the money, as he did not want to have a bad reputation, since the name of our family would be at stake. It would not be good for the Tyrells to have a name that accompanies their house being the opposite of the Lannister family, since they always pay their debts. In the end, Jon left the negotiation room satisfied. He had spent the amount of 500,000 golden dragons he had won, adding up to a total of over 800,000 gold coins, and purchasing at least 8,000 war-ready, powerful breed horses, with the first batch of 3,000 already being prepared for the ships. Over the last few days, he appreciated Villas' suggestions and ended up accepting these breeds that the man had praised. Jon had big plans for these horses. He himself could improve and breed them easily. He would have his army equipped with a powerful cavalry, which would make Artica even stronger. King of Artica, as Jon exited the room with Willis, Garland quickly approached while calling his attention. "Yes?" Jon asked, with 3 royal guard behind him. "My grandmother is asking if there could be a private conversation between you two," he said, and Jon thought about it. Lady Olenna wanted to have a word with him at this time, since we've practically negotiated everything. Jon nodded in the end. "All right, lead the way," he requested, and then followed him to meet with the matriarch of House Tyrell, seated in the garden, sipping tea alone. Jon had never stopped to talk with her alone, which he found strange, but approached with curiosity. "You finally arrived, King of Artica," she spoke as soon as he appeared. "Lady Olenna." Jon approached the spot, while his guards maintained some distance for a private conversation. "You know, I feel so young when in the company of a man so handsome, especially when he's the hero of the tournament, perhaps a deadly sword on the battlefield. They say so much about you that I can't decide," she said sarcastically while raising an eyebrow. Jon approached without saying anything, not wanting to give any response to that woman. "Is it all right if I sit here?" was the only thing he said while she gave an obvious gesture. He sat in front of her and looked at the garden while she stared at him. His gaze returned to her a moment later. Olenna said nothing but kept analyzing him. Jon also remained silent, waiting for this woman to finish whatever she was doing. It was then that she decided to break the silence. "Tell me, King of Artica, what is your vision for the future?" she asked suddenly, wasting no time. Olenna did not like to beat around the bush with pretty words. Jon raised an eyebrow at her, surprised by the question, but decided to answer. "Well, to enrich and create a prosperous kingdom. A kingdom that need not worry about anything, that has no enemies, only allies," Jon commented with a smile. "A kingdom with only allies and no enemies. That's rather naive, don't you think, boy? We all have enemies," she commented, and he just gave a tight-lipped smile. "You can say that I know very well what I'm talking about, Lady Olenna," he replied, maintaining a more serious look. Olenna looked at him for a while. "What do you plan for Westeros?" she suddenly asked with an earnest tone. Jon heard this and pondered the question for a moment. She wanted to know what he exactly planned with the 7 kingdoms. Not that a conversation could confirm anything, but it would be a start to see if Jon was a threat. "I have nothing against Westeros. We are not from these realms and prefer to keep our relationship as trading partners, but I can't let any of my kin die here, or even if any Artican was killed by hand from this realm, I will respond accordingly." Jon spoke with a tone even firmer than serious. "Even your common people?" she asked curiously. After all, Jon seemed to care about all the people with him. "Even the common people, Lady Olenna. Their safety is my responsibility," Jon said. I see. Olenna seemed to ponder Jon's words for a moment. It was rare to see a noble say that about their people. Perhaps you are more like Lord Stark than I thought. She spoke, as honorable as the wolf of the north. I do not consider myself an honorable person, Lady Olenna. I will do what it takes to save my people, even if it means committing a massacre. Jon spoke in a somber tone. Olenna heard this, knowing Jon had his limits, but she maintained a half-smile on her face and her gaze as sharp as ever. And what are your intentions with the Tyrells? After all this negotiation, you must have some expectations. Jon returned to a calm demeanor. My intention is to ensure there are no hard feelings between our people. The negotiations were tough and long, but fair. I hope we can look to the future as partners, not rivals, Jon said, though he didn't quite believe it if you were honest. That's good, but tell me something. If you had any right below the wall, would you claim anything? She suddenly asked. Although Jon found the question odd, he answered it calmly. I have no rights, and even if I did, I'm not interested in managing lands that don't belong to Artica, Jon said sincerely, believing she was referring to Winterfell. It seems you're not as ambitious as I initially thought, she said. I have my own ambitions, Lady Olenna, and lands in the south are not among them, except, of course, acquiring some land areas where I can build a port under the Artican flag to boost trade, Jon said. Interesting, but you know this will be very upsetting for some nobles. Lord Hightower is worried about losing trade in Old Town, and I bet the old lion, Tywin Lannister, must be gnashing his teeth right now. She mocked. If that's the case, they want unfair competition and are petty in my opinion. Trade is always a good way to bring more prosperity with more products on the market and more affordable prices for the common people, Jon commented. He entered with his company to boost world trade. Those fools who think they want to stop his products will bring bad situations for their own trade. After all, with Dorne already trading Arcan products, this would make people interested in these lands. Well, I would let them scream and complain, though I believe the old lion will see some positive points in your trade. Do you plan to go there? She asked. Yes, but I want to go to Old Town first. I want to pick up a large amount of books at the Citadel, Jon said as Olenna raised an eyebrow to that. You intend to go there? I would advise you to be careful. Olenna was sincere. She knew that Lord Hightower had a hostile look toward Jon, and even the Maester seemed quite agitated last week. I know how to take care of myself, Lady Olenna. Jon spoke in a calm tone. Anyway, we would like to visit this kingdom one day. When will you open your kingdom? She asked, knowing that Jon was taking people to educate his people and holding them for 5 years in Artica. In a few years, I'll make a trip to the east soon. I will stay there a year before returning to the kingdom. I plan to work on this as soon as we stabilize our economy for the world. Jon talked a bit about his superficial plans. I see, she said in the end, as they ended up talking about other topics. But nothing as important as the topics discussed before. Jon knew she was looking at him strangely the entire time, as if she was trying to indicate someone in her. And when she spoke of his father, she never said he was his father, unlike when referring to Arya, which was strange. And it was even strange she asked if he had any right to lands beyond Artica, since he was a bastard. But Jon knew that if he pressed and asked about this fact, he wouldn't get the answer he wanted. It was a pleasure talking with you, King of Artica. I hope we have good business and a good journey to your kingdom. She commented, still analyzing him, while he nodded. Goodbye, Lady Olenna. I hope our trade is very prosperous. I enjoyed spending a good amount of gold with you on those horses and livestock animals, Jon said. After all, he didn't just buy breed horses, but many animals to raise in Artica and have a meat system that could supply the entire population that would soon grow, as well as his wolves and other animals in the forest area within the walls. Jon began to leave, meeting his wife and other ladies outside, when Lady Marjorie approached to greet him with the same look she always gave him. King Jon, I hope you have a good journey. I will miss your wife and sister greatly. It's a shame not to have such charming and intelligent company anymore. She spoke in a courteous tone. It is true that Highgarden has been quite welcoming, and we will not forget that, but we must continue our journey. We are moons away from home, and I intend for my children to be born on my lands. So we must move on. Jon spoke as she nodded, still looking at him, almost trying to seduce him. After that, Jon went on to greet Willis and Garland, with Renly and Loras also appearing. Renly called him over to talk a lot. Jon knew that the man wanted to form an alliance and could see his ambitions for his brother's throne, which was very strange. But matters of Westeros were not something he wanted to get involved in, not when his father, Bran, or even Rickon were not at risk. Jon didn't care much for Robb or Sansa. After all, he had hardened his heart towards those too many years ago. Then, after greeting these people, he began to organize his departure while heading to his camp. His men were already organizing all sorts of items and packing up their tents quickly. Jon had also left a stock to keep the banquets going as a toast. After all, the parties here would continue for another week after the end of the tournament. Many were a bit frustrated with the champion of the Joust leaving, but Jon could no longer waste time. While Oak Garden was infested with his ships at this time, loading all the horses he had managed to acquire in the first place. 8,000 select horses are not easy to organize, so they had to load only what they managed for this trip, which was 3,000 initially from the first negotiations they had 2 weeks ago. There were many nobles with a good number of these horses, and with the absence of wars in Westeros, they were not so necessary, making them easy to acquire. Jon had already organized to pick up the other 5,000 horses when he brought the new trade cargo. Jon arrived at the camp while everything seemed quite agitated. A man came to speak to him as soon as he arrived. "My king, there is a man here to speak with you. He insisted that you had a proposal for him, and he said he was your opponent in the first joust of the tournament." The man spoke while Jon raised an eyebrow to this. "Samwell Tarly?" Jon asked. "Yes, my king." The guard confirmed. "I'll speak with him." "Where is he?" Jon asked. "He's in the main tent, which we haven't taken down yet," he said, and Jon nodded. "Let's go there," Jon said. Inside the tent, Samwell was quite uncomfortable. While everyone there looked at him, there were at least 6 Archons taking care of him. The dwarves seemed to stare at him as if he was a dead man, and for Samwell it was frightening. "Can you stop scaring him?" Jon's voice emerged as everyone saw him entering. "Leave me with him alone," Jon ordered while the men finally nodded and left. "King Jon," Samwell said cautiously. "Few people call me that, Samwell Tarly." Jon did not fail to say as most everyone called him King of Artica. "I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you." Samwell quickly apologized, not wanting to offend this man. "No offense taken, my friend. Tell me, are you here for the proposal I made?" Jon asked. "Yes, and I initially wanted to thank you for what you did in the first game of the joust. I know you did something with my horse." King Artica. He spoke, aware of the rumors about Jon and knowing that horse was beyond his control. "It was nothing. I saw that you needed some help there," Jon said in a calm tone, not minding something like this being revealed to this guy. "Thank you. I think I've never been looked upon so favorably by my father," Samwell commented, recalling how his father, without a word, nodded to him, while his family exclaimed how he had learned to ride in that manner. Samwell continued, "And about your proposal to go to Artica, I'm sorry, I couldn't do that," he said. After all, despite feeling favorably about it, he was afraid to leave just like that. Jon looked at him for a while and nodded, understanding. "That's all right. I just hope you won't regret this," Jon finally said. "Yes, I hope so too," Samwell said in the end, and they concluded the conversation there, while Jon went back to organizing the camp with the Articans. He finally wrapped it up as everyone prepared for the journey, and after a few hours, a large crowd of nobles and commoners watched the group depart, hoping to see those giants and Jon, the hero of the tournament and the victor of the final joust, finally leaving. Eldrich also managed to secure a bride. He came to talk to him about a woman from the south, and his family ended up betting on this marriage. They were from a very small family, just a vassal of another Tyrell vassal, so it was an opportunity for that noblewoman. Even though Eldrich was not a noble, he certainly had a name in Artica. This was done with a contract with the family, as the woman would not be able to have contact with her family for the next few years. But as soon as Artica could be opened, they could go visit. With that, Jon had all the contracts ready and was finally departing, heading to his fleet at sea again and moving on to his next point, which would be Old Town after Lord Hightower insisted heavily for him to go there. No one imagined that this would be the starting point of a chaos that would spread throughout Westeros from that point on.